Section 1. The warmth that hides everything else. Close your eyes for a moment, or let them rest half open on the ceiling, on the dark behind your eyelids, on whatever softness the night has given you tonight. You don't have to be fully awake for this. You don't have to be taking notes or sitting upright with a pen in your hand. This is the kind of story you can receive lying down, slowly, the way rain arrives not all at once, but piece by piece, and by the time you realize how much of it there is, you're already soaked through. Steven Universe is a show about a boy who lives in a beach house in a small town called Beach City. He has curly dark hair and a pink star on his belly, and a laugh that fills every room he walks into. He makes friends easily. He loves donuts and his dad and his cat and the ocean, and a cartoon called Crying Breakfast Friends. He is, on first glance, the warmest possible protagonist a show could choose. He is round and soft and joyful, in the way children sometimes are before the world has had time to make them careful. And the show that carries him is also warm. It is bright. It is pastel-colored and beach-set and full of songs that you find yourself humming in the shower 2 days later without knowing why. It has an adventurous spirit and a generous heart, and the kind of creative energy that makes children sit very close to the television and adults pause in the doorway and forget they were going somewhere else. It aired on Cartoon Network beginning in 2013 and ran, in various forms, through 2020. And the people who watched it really watched it tend to carry it with them in a specific, quiet way. Not the way you carry something you enjoyed, the way you carry something that changed how you see. Because here's the thing about Steven Universe. The thing you will spend the next several hours discovering in the slowest, most comfortable way possible. It was never only what it appeared to be on the surface. The warmth was real, the kindness was genuine. But underneath it, woven into the very structure of the world building, embedded in the backstory, hidden inside the songs and the expressions of background characters, and the architecture of alien civilizations, there was something else entirely. Something heavy. Something that gets heavier the more you know. This is not a story that tricked you. That is the important distinction to hold on to as we begin. Steven Universe did not bait and switch its audience with false lightness. The warmth was always there, always true, always meant. But the darkness was there too, occupying the same space. And the show trusted you to grow into it. It trusted that the child watching the bright colors and the singing would, someday, be old enough to look again and understand what the singing was about. It trusted the adult pausing in the doorway to eventually come all the way in and sit down. Rebecca Sugar, the creator of the show, has spoken in interviews and in the beautiful companion art book called The Art and Making of Steven Universe about the intention behind this layering. She wanted to make something that could be received on multiple levels simultaneously. A child could watch and find joy and adventure and a hero to root for. An adult could watch and find grief and accountability and the complicated archaeology of inherited trauma. And someone watching for the second time, or the fifth, or the 10th, might find something they had entirely missed the first time around, a detail in the background, a line reading that suddenly shifts, a piece of lore that recontextualizes everything that came before it. That is what this video is. It is an invitation to look again. Or, if this is your first time, it is an invitation to understand what you are looking at before you look. Either way, the looking is what matters. The slow, careful, sleepy attention to a world that was built with extraordinary love and extraordinary sorrow, and a profound commitment to honesty about what it means to be shaped by forces you never chose. Let's begin with Beach City, because Beach City is where the warmth lives most visibly. It is a small, somewhat run-down coastal town on the eastern seaboard of the United States. It has a boardwalk, and an arcade, and a big donut, and a car wash, and a fry shop called Fish Stew Pizza, which serves both fish and pizza, and apparently pizza made of fish, and nobody seems to find this particularly alarming. It has a pizza family, and a Williams family, and a Fryman family, and a Maheshwaran family, and a mayor named Dewey, who is well-meaning in the way that only slightly ineffective people can be. It has seagulls and tourists, and a lighthouse that sits above everything and watches. At the edge of town, up on a cliff above the beach, there is a house. It is a converted van. Really a large pink van that has been expanded and built around and turned over many years into something genuinely home-shaped. There is a warp pad in the living room, which is how you know immediately that this is not an ordinary house. even though the television and the couch and the pile of old video games do their best to make it feel like one. And at the top of the house, in a room made mostly of windows, there lives a boy named Steven Universe. His full name is Steven Quartz Universe. The quartz is from his mother. The universe is from his father, Greg, who drives a van and lives at the car wash and plays guitar with the particular melancholy competence of someone who had one really significant musical era in his late teens and has been gently coasting on its memory ever since. Greg Universe is a good father. He shows up, he tries, he has conversations with his son that most parents would not know how to have, and he has them imperfectly and honestly and with obvious love. And Steven's mother, his mother is where things begin to get complicated. Her name, the name she went by when she knew Greg, when she raised an army, when she lived in Beach City and watched the sun set over the ocean and chose to stop being what she had been, was Rose Quartz. She was a gem, a member of an alien species called the Crystal Gems, beings made of living hard light who are defined by the gemstone fused into their physical forms. Rose's gem was a rose quartz, a soft pink stone set in her navel. She was tall and broad-shouldered and had a magnificent cascade of pink curls and a laugh that is described by every person who ever knew her as the most significant sound they had ever heard. She is dead when the show begins. Or not dead, exactly. Gems do not die in the way humans do, but gone. She gave up her physical form to create Steven. Her gem is now his. He carries her literally inside himself, embedded in his stomach where she once lived. He has her power and her legacy and everyone's memories of her and a burning need to understand who she was, because who she was is inseparable from who he is. This is the emotional engine of the show, the thing that runs underneath every adventure and every song and every quiet beach town moment. A boy trying to understand his mother, trying to earn the love people already had for her and find out whether that love was deserved, trying to figure out where she ends and he begins. It is a universal story dressed in an extraordinary costume. Every person who has ever felt like they were living in the shadow of a parent loving them, resenting them, trying to separate their own identity from the one that was handed to them at birth will recognize something in Steven's journey. But the costume matters. Because the story of Rose Quartz is not just the story of a complicated mother. It is the story of a war, a civilization, a system of power so vast and so ancient that its damage is still being felt thousands of years after the last battle. It is the story of colonialism and identity, and the lies we tell to survive, and the price of those lies, paid not by the people who told them, but by the people who come after. It is one of the most carefully constructed pieces of science fiction mythology in animation history, and it is hiding inside a show about a kid who really likes donuts. So, let's start the unpacking here, gently, in this first section, while you settle in and let your breathing slow and your muscles release their daily grip on the world. Let's start with just the surface, the warmth, and acknowledge that it is real, because it is. The warmth of Steven Universe is not a deception. It is not a mask. It is one half of the truth, and the show holds both halves with equal care. Steven grows up with 3 crystal gems who serve as his guardians. There is Garnet, who is tall and dark-skinned and stoic and wears a visor and square-tipped boots and speaks in statements rather than sentences. She is the leader of the group in the present day, and she has an authority that comes not from aggression but from absolute certainty. She knows things, she sees things, and she makes decisions with a calm that Steven will eventually understand is not coldness but depth. There is Pearl, who is slender and pale and fussy and organized and deeply, visibly, perpetually sad. In a way, she works very hard to dress up as competence. She maintains the temple, trains Steven, plans the missions, and misses Rose in a way that has no bottom. And there is Amethyst, who is short and purple and chaotic and eats things she cannot digest for fun and sleeps in a pile of garbage and loves Steven with a fierceness that sometimes looks like teasing but is always, underneath, a kind of grateful devotion. These 3, plus Steven, are the crystal gems. They protect the Earth from threats mostly related to corrupted gems or ancient gem structures left over from a civilization that once tried to terraform the planet, and they live together in a beach house and argue about how to fold laundry and try, in their various broken and well-meaning ways, to raise a child. It is funny. It is genuinely, consistently funny, the kind of warm domestic comedy that makes you feel held, and it is also, if you are paying attention, incredibly sad. because Pearl has been waiting for something that will never come back. Garnet is holding a secret about her very existence that she has carried alone for thousands of years. Amethyst was born wrong, by her own people's standards, and has never fully forgiven herself or the world for that. And all three of them are, in different ways, circling the void left by Rose Quartz, trying to understand what she meant and who she was, and whether they can love her and be angry at her at the same time. Which, yes, it turns out you can. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let the warmth be enough. Let the beach town settle around you. Let the sound of the ocean come in through those big windows in Steven's room. He is asleep in his starprint bed, or he is lying awake looking at the ceiling, or he is standing on the beach in the dark watching the waves. And the gems are in the temple behind the house, each in their own room, each with their own interior world, each carrying more than they have told him. He will find out. That is the promise of the show, and you can trust it. He will find out, and so will you, and the finding out will be worth the wait. For now, rest. For now, this is just a story about a boy and his family in a small town by the sea. Before we go further, if you made it this far into the video, drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. There's something special about knowing this video is keeping people company at 3 in the morning in Tokyo or 9 at night in Sao Paulo or whenever you happen to need it. And if this is the kind of content you want more of, subscribing helps more than you might think. Now let's go deeper. Section 2. The Diamond Authority, a civilization built on extraction. There is a moment in the episode Marble Madness, relatively early in the show's run, when Steven asks a Peridot, a small, sharp-voiced gem technician who has arrived to check on something called the kindergarten, what she is actually doing on Earth. And Peridot, who at this point in the story is entirely a villain, who has not yet become the wonderfully strange resident of a barn that she will later become, explains it as though it is the most obvious thing in the world. She is checking on a colony. Earth was a colony. The gems came here to take what they needed, and they would have taken all of it, and then they would have left, and the planet would have been a husk. She says this the way someone might explain that they were checking on a factory. It is industrial language applied to a living world, and in that small moment, the show does something very clever. It lets you feel the horror of it without underlining it. It trusts you to register the chill. To understand what Earth was, you have to understand what the gem civilization is. And to understand that, you have to start at the top, with the entities called the diamonds. The diamonds are not merely rulers. That word is too small for them. They are, in the world of Steven Universe, something closer to gods, or rather, to the kind of entities that lesser beings make gods of when they encounter them. There are 4 of them: yellow diamond, blue diamond, white diamond, and pink diamond. Each one is enormous. We are talking about beings who stand several stories tall, who communicate across star systems, who have existed for so long that the idea of their ever not existing is essentially incoherent to the civilization that grew up around them. Their authority is not questioned. It cannot be questioned, because the entire social architecture of gem civilization has been built on the foundation of their unquestionable permanence. The gem civilization is, at its core, a caste system expressed through geology. Every gem is made manufactured, in a very literal sense, and the kind of gem you are determines everything about your place in the hierarchy. Rubies are common soldiers, mass-produced and deployed in groups because no individual ruby is considered significant enough to matter alone. Sapphires are rare, valued for their ability to see the future, kept close to the upper echelons of power as advisors. Pearls, and this is one of the details that gets more painful every time you revisit it. Pearls are servants. They are made to be beautiful and obedient and owned. They stand beside the gems they belong to and hold things and look decorative and have no purpose beyond the function they were manufactured to perform. They are not supposed to have opinions. They are certainly not supposed to have feelings. Amethysts are soldiers mid-tier, reliable, interchangeable. Peridots are technicians. Jaspers are warriors, tough and aggressive and built for combat. Aquamarines are high-status diplomats. Topazes are enforcers. And on, down through a hierarchy so complete and so naturalized that most gems within it simply do not think to question it. It is not oppression to them. It is physics. It is the way the universe works. You are what your gem says you are, and your gem says you are what Homeworld needs you to be, and Homeworld knows what it needs because the diamonds know. And the diamonds have always known since before any of them can remember. This is the world Yellow Diamond runs like a business, and Blue Diamond tends like a grief. And White Diamond, at the center of it all, does something even more absolute. She runs it like a religion. Let's talk about the physical reality of gem colonization, because it is one of the most quietly horrifying pieces of world building in the show, and it is explained so matter-of-factly that you can almost miss what you are being told. When gems colonize a planet, they identify areas rich in the right minerals and they plant what are called kindergartens. A kindergarten looks, initially, like nothing just rock, selected rock, carved into chambers. And then, slowly, over years or decades or centuries, new gems incubate inside those chambers, drawing their material from the planet itself. They grow inside the rock like crystals in a geode, taking shape over time, absorbing the minerals and energy they need. And what they leave behind is dead. Not damaged, not depleted, dead. The land around a kindergarten, the ground from which gems were harvested, is permanently drained. The grass will not grow back. The soil will not recover. The ecosystem that existed there is gone. Not temporarily, not in a way that will heal with time, but irrevocably, structurally, at the molecular level. The gems took what was there and used it to make themselves. And nothing remains. Earth's kindergarten, the one in the desert in what appears to be the American Southwest, the one Amethyst emerged from, the one Peridot comes to check on, is one kindergarten. One. And the land around it, shown in the background of multiple episodes, is barren in a way that immediately registers as wrong. The rock is too pale. The ground is too smooth. Nothing lives there. In the thousands of years since the kindergarten was abandoned, nothing has grown back. The damage is not historical, it is present tense. And here is the detail that the show gives you quietly, almost in passing, in the episode When It Rains. The plan for Earth did not involve one kindergarten. It involved 89. 89 kindergartens placed across the planet, each one draining the life from its surrounding area, each one producing hundreds or thousands of new gems. The plan was to take approximately everything the Earth had to offer in terms of raw, gem-generative material and convert it into soldiers and workers and servants for the Diamond Authority. The planet would not have survived it. Earth would have become what the crystal gems call a dead world. Technically still a planet, technically still orbiting the sun, but without the conditions to support the life that had been there. The humans would have died. Every human. All of them, with their languages and their music and their paintings on cave walls and their particular, fragile, extraordinary habit of caring about things, all of it, gone. Not because the diamonds hated humans. They didn't. They didn't think about humans at all. Humans were irrelevant. They were like the moss on a rock that gets scraped away before you examine the mineral content. The moss is not the point. The moss does not get considered. This is the texture of Homeworld's colonialism, and it is not a metaphor the show is shy about. Rebecca Sugar has been asked about the influence of real-world colonial history on the world building, and she has confirmed that it was very much present in the design. The gems arrive with a civilization that considers the resources of other worlds to be rightfully theirs by virtue of their power and their need. They do not engage with what is already there. They do not negotiate. They assess, and they take, and they leave. The idea that a planet might have value as a living system rather than as a mineral deposit simply does not fit into their framework of thinking. Yellow Diamond is the most efficient embodiment of this framework. She is the one who runs things. She is the one who signs the orders and deploys the armies and makes the pragmatic calculations. She wants what is useful, and she wants it without sentimentality, and she has no patience for inefficiency, which in her lexicon includes any emotional response that delays action. She is not cruel in the way a sadist is cruel. She is cruel in the way a machine is cruel, not because she enjoys the damage, but because she has decided that damage is a reasonable cost, and she has made that calculation so many times that it no longer registers as a calculation. Her song, What's the Use of Feeling Blue? And yes, this show has its villains sing, and yes, the songs are incredible, and yes, we will talk about the music later, is one of the most revealing pieces of characterization in the series. She is singing to Blue Diamond, who is still mourning a loss we will get to shortly, and the argument she is making is essentially, stop feeling things. Feelings are inefficient. You have a civilization to run. Get back to work. And she is singing it with genuine force and genuine conviction. And there is something in the performance, in the voice acting, in the staging that makes you understand that Yellow Diamond is not being heartless. She is being frightened. The feelings she is telling Blue Diamond to suppress are the feelings she is most afraid of in herself. Because Yellow Diamond, it will turn out, is also grieving. She is just better at hiding it, and she has convinced herself that hiding it is the same as being over it. Blue Diamond is the grief made visible. She is the one who sits in the middle of a paused, still preserved piece of earth and cries. She has a power, passive and unconscious, to project her sadness onto anyone near her. Gems in her presence feel her grief as their own, not metaphorically, but literally, their emotional state overwritten by hers. It is presented as a kind of empathy, a resonance. It is also, if you think about it, a kind of violation. She cannot help it, the show is careful to make clear. But the result is still the same. Everyone near Blue Diamond has to carry her feelings whether they want to or not. The two of them together, Yellow efficient and controlled, Blue openly devastated, form a picture of grief that is instantly recognizable to anyone who has lost something. The one who pushes forward, who keeps working, who cannot afford to stop, and the one who stops entirely, who builds a monument around the loss and sits inside it. Neither of them is handling it well. Neither of them is handling it at all, really. They are two different failures of processing, and they have been failing for thousands of years, and the civilization they run has been warped by their failure in ways that reach into every corner of every gem's life. And then there is White Diamond. White Diamond does not appear in the show for a very long time. She is hinted at, referred to obliquely, shown only in iconography and symbol. When she finally appears, it is in the Season 5 finale, Change Your Mind, and the appearance is, there is no other word for it, one of the most unsettling moments in the entire series. She is enormous. She is pale to the point of translucency. She is perfect in a way that is deeply wrong, the way a wax figure is wrong, the perfection of a thing that has had all the individuality removed. Her power is control, not the control that comes from authority or charisma or force of will. The control that comes from the ability to literally remove a gem's personality and replace it with an extension of herself. She can take any gem, at any time, and make it white, make it empty, make it a puppet wearing a body that used to belong to someone. She has done this to her own Pearl, who appears as a hollow-eyed, silver-haired figure who speaks only in White Diamond's voice and has, as far as we can tell, no inner life remaining. The justification White Diamond offers for this power, and she does offer one in the episode's confrontation with the calm reasonableness of someone who has never once been told no, is that every gem is better when they are their most perfect selves, and their most perfect self is the version that aligns with her. She is not taking anything from them. She is clarifying them. She is removing the impurities. The self that she erases is not a self that matters, because it was always already a deviation from the ideal. And the ideal is, naturally, her. This is presented as the terminus of the Diamond Authority's logic. The caste system, the colonization, the industrial extraction of living planets, the armies of soldiers who are not allowed to want things, all of it ends here, at White Diamond, who has decided that the best possible version of any being is the version that agrees with her. She is the endpoint of a civilization that has decided that unity means conformity, that perfection means the elimination of the individual, that the highest achievement is the absence of the thing that makes you specifically yourself. She is terrifying. And she is also, when Steven finally reaches her, and when the confrontation unfolds, something else. She is lonely. She is perfectly, completely, cosmically lonely, sealed inside a perfection that nothing real can touch, because real things are imperfect, and she has made herself unable to want anything imperfect. She has curated herself into isolation. The diamond who controls everything has nothing. And when Steven makes her laugh, genuinely laugh, an ugly, undignified, surprised laugh, it is one of the most emotionally loaded moments in the series, because it is the sound of something that has been locked away for so long that it has forgotten its own name. But that is not yet where we are. We will get there. For now, stay with the shape of the civilization. Hold it in your mind as you drift this vast, ancient, hierarchical machine that believed it was order itself, that believed order was the highest good, that had been running on those beliefs for so long that it could not imagine anything else. And somewhere in that machine, a long time ago, there was a pink diamond. Section 3. Pink Diamond. The original crime. She was the youngest. That is the first thing to know. The youngest of the 4 diamonds, the smallest, the one who came last to the table of power, the one who was always slightly in the position of catching up. The others had been running civilizations for so long before her that their habits were carved in stone literally, in some cases. Their palaces and their courts and their systems were established. Their armies were trained. Their identities were solid in the way that very old, very powerful things are solid, immovable, certain of themselves, not interested in questions. Pink Diamond was not like that. Pink Diamond was, and this is information you get in pieces, slowly, through the show's long, careful archaeology curious, excitable, prone to something that looked like wonder, which was an entirely foreign concept in the Diamond Authority's framework. She wanted to touch things and examine them and ask about them. She wanted to understand what she was looking at. When she was given a palanquin to ride in, she kept climbing out of it to look at things on the ground. When she was given soldiers to command, she tried to learn their names. She was, in the framework of the civilization she was born into, basically inexplicable. The other diamonds, particularly yellow and blue, who are the ones we see interact with her most, tried to manage this. They were not unkind, exactly. They were not cruel to her in the way of deliberate cruelty, but they were condescending in the very particular way of people who love something and think that love entitles them to decide what's best for it. They indulged her the way you indulge a child, and they corrected her the way you correct a child, and they never quite upgraded their framework to acknowledge that she was not a child, that she was their equal in authority even if not in age, that the things she was curious about might have value. They gave her a pearl. In the gem civilization, pearls are luxury items, high-status accessories, companions for the upper echelons. Giving a diamond a pearl is like giving someone a personal assistant, except the personal assistant has no rights and no selfhood, and was manufactured specifically to serve and cannot disobey direct commands. Pink Diamond's pearl was originally pink-hued, cheerful, devoted. She would become something very different later. But when she was first given to Pink Diamond, she was what she was made to be, a companion, an attendant, a friend in the way that only someone with no choice but to be your friend can be a friend. Pink Diamond loved her pearl. That much is clear from everything we see. She loved her the way you love someone you have spent centuries with in close proximity, the way you love someone who knows your private face, the one you don't show to the court. It was not an equal love, because it could not be. The power differential was absolute, was structural, was built into the pearl's very creation, but it was real. And when Pink Diamond did something she did not mean to do, something that came out of distress and anger and the helplessness of being perpetually diminished and cracked her pearl's gem, the horror she felt was genuine. The damage was permanent, visible, carved into the pearl's cheek like a scar, and Pink Diamond could not undo it. But let's back up to how that distress came about, because the path there is important. Pink Diamond wanted a planet. That is how colonies worked in the gem civilization. Each diamond had their own collection of colonies, planets they had terraformed and used and moved on from, a kind of empire building that was also, in the gem framework, the highest expression of a diamond's power and authority. Having a colony was having a project. It was proof of your significance. Pink Diamond wanted Earth. She asked for it. She asked the way she asked for most things directly, with enthusiasm, with the brightness of someone who hasn't yet learned that brightness is considered undignified in the Diamond Authority. The others were reluctant. They thought she was too young, too inexperienced, not ready for the responsibility of managing a colony. But eventually she got it. Earth was hers. And then she got there, and she saw it. She saw the ocean and the mountains and the life. She saw the humans, these small, short-lived, soft creatures who built things out of wood and stone and sang songs and looked at the stars with something she did not have a word for, but which she would come to understand was the same thing she had felt every time she had climbed out of her palanquin to look at something on the ground. She saw the life of Earth, and she did not see raw material. She saw something that deserved to be left alone. She asked the other diamonds to stop the colonization. She told them about the humans. She argued earnestly, repeatedly, with increasing desperation that Earth was different, that it should be preserved, that what was there was worth more than the gems they could extract from it. The other diamonds said no. They were not unmoved by her argument. Blue Diamond in particular seemed to at least hear it, but they said no. Colonies were colonies. Earth had been designated. The kindergartens had been started. The machinery of colonization was in motion, and stopping it would be, in the Diamond Authority's framework, a kind of waste, a kind of admitting error. And the Diamond Authority did not admit errors. So Pink Diamond tried something different. She created a persona. She decided that if the crystal gems, the rebel army she had been hearing rumors about, the gems on Earth who were fighting against the colonization were becoming a problem, then the way to stop the colonization was to make the crystal gems a bigger problem than they were. She went among the gems of the kindergarten and the gem facilities on Earth, and she told them, in a form she had constructed specifically for the purpose, that they were worth more than their function, that they could fight, that they had a choice. And she called herself Rose Quartz. This is the reveal. This is the piece of information around which the entire show turns. The revelation that the series withholds for 4 seasons and then releases at the end of season 5, and it recontextualizes everything. Rose Quartz, the legendary crystal gem leader, the great rebel, the savior of Earth, the woman whom every gem who ever met her loved desperately and immediately, and without reserve. Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond. They were the same person. The rebellion was, at its origin, an inside job. The diamond who owned the colony created the army that fought to stop the colonization. And then, when that did not work, when even a crystal gem rebellion was not enough to convince Yellow and Blue to abandon their claim on Earth, when it became clear that the only thing that would make them leave was the death of a Pink Diamond, staged her own shattering. She planned it carefully. She and Pearl, her Pearl, who was now also playing a role as a crystal gem, who was the only being in the universe who knew the full truth, arranged a scenario in which it would appear that Rose Quartz had shattered Pink Diamond. Pearl shapeshifted into Rose Quartz. Pink Diamond in her Pink Diamond form, her real form, the enormous diamond form appeared to be shattered. Her gem was there, cracked into pieces on the ground. Her court was there to witness it. The other diamonds arrived to find their youngest, their smallest, already gone. And then Pink Diamond, in her Rose Quartz form, which was small enough to be someone else entirely, walked away. She walked away from her name and her history and her court and her Pearl and everything she had been, and she became Rose Quartz full-time. She buried herself inside a fiction. She told no one, not Garnet, not Amethyst, not any of the crystal gems who would have followed her into any fire. She kept one person who knew, Pearl. And she commanded Pearl, commanded her in the way a diamond commands a pearl, in the way that Pearl's creation made it impossible to disobey, never to reveal the truth, never to tell anyone who Rose Quartz really was. Let that weight settle for a moment. Let it find its place. Pearl could not tell Garnet. Pearl could not tell Amethyst. Pearl could not tell anyone ever, any version of the truth, because she had been commanded by the person she loved most in the universe, commanded at the deepest structural level of her being to keep silent. There would come a moment, thousands of years later, when Steven would ask Pearl directly whether she knew anything about Pink Diamond, and Pearl would open her mouth and her voice would cut out, and she would look at him with something that is one of the most heartbreaking expressions in the show, because it is the look of someone who is being tortured by a command she cannot resist, who is right there, who has the answer, who wants desperately to give it, and who literally cannot. The command didn't just stop her words, it stopped the attempt. She could not even begin to tell him. She would glitch, she would stutter, she would leave the room, she would distract with something else, and she would hate herself for it. Because Pearl loved Steven. Pearl had loved Rose, and she loved Steven, and she was forbidden to give him the one thing that would have helped him most, the truth about who he was and where he came from. Now let's talk about what Pink Diamond's choice cost. Not just Pearl, the whole story. Pink Diamond was afraid. That is not a criticism, it is a description. She was a young, overwhelmed being who had tried every legitimate channel available to her and been refused, who was watching a living world get destroyed and felt responsible for it, who was out of options, or at least that was how it felt. The fake shattering was not a good plan. It was a desperate plan, and it worked, in the narrow sense that the other diamonds stopped the colonization of Earth and withdrew. But it worked by causing the other diamonds to believe that rose quartz had shattered their sister, which made rose quartz and every rose quartz an enemy. Every gem carrying a rose quartz gemstone, everywhere in the universe, became associated with the alleged murder of a diamond. There was a retaliation. In her grief and her fury, Yellow Diamond ordered all rose quartz gems to be bubbled, captured, and contained, put into indefinite magical stasis, alive but removed from existence. There were apparently quite a few rose quartz gems. They were all bubbled. All of them, for a crime none of them committed, because the one who actually played the role of rose quartz that day had staged a death and walked away. And then there was the corruption. We will get to the corruption in full later, but it is relevant here. When Pink Diamond's supposed death was confirmed, Yellow and Blue Diamond unleashed what can only be described as a weapon of grief, a sound, a combined diamond scream, so powerful and so vast that it swept across the earth and transformed every gem on it. It did not shatter them. It did something worse. It twisted them, scrambled their forms, left them as feral, mindless, monstrous versions of themselves, still alive but entirely gone, trapped in bodies that no longer functioned the way they were built to function. It was a weapon of grief used against a planet that was not involved in a grievance they did not fully understand. Pink Diamond Rose Quartz was on Earth when it happened. She and Pearl and Garnet and Amethyst were protected from the corruption by Rose's shield. They survived. The thousands of other crystal gems did not. They became monsters, and Rose spent the rest of her life trying to help them, catching them with her healing powers and bubbling them to keep them contained and safe, which is to say putting them in indefinite stasis, alive but unreachable, for as long as she could manage, which was a very long time. She never cured them. In thousands of years, she never found a way to cure the corruption. Whether she had the power to do it herself is unclear. What is clear is that the only full cure required the combined power of all 4 diamonds, and as long as the other 3 diamonds believed Pink Diamond was dead, that was not possible. She made a choice, and then she lived with it. She remade herself as Rose Quartz, and she loved that self, and she found joy in the world she had saved, and she had relationships and causes and long centuries of experience. But underneath it was always the things she had done and the things her doing it had cost. Every gem in those bubbles in the temple's basement was there, at least in part, because of her. Every rose quartz gem in stasis across the galaxy was there because of her. Pearl's silence was because of her. The corruption itself, the fact that Yellow and Blue Diamond had been grief-damaged enough to unleash that weapon in the first place, was because of her. She knew. She has to have known. It would be unbearable to believe she didn't, and she kept going. She kept being Rose Quartz, which is perhaps the most interesting and complicated thing about her. She did not collapse under the weight of what she had done. She made it part of herself, added it to the collection of heavy things she carried, and kept moving forward. You could read this as resilience. You could read it as compartmentalization. You could read it as the psychological necessity of a person who had no one she could actually tell the truth to, who had to live the lie so completely that there was no gap between the lie and the self. What she could not do, what she perhaps never did, was grieve. Not properly, not with someone who knew, because the someone who knew was Pearl, who had been commanded not to speak of it, and the command covered more than words. It covered the space between them where honesty would have lived. And then there was Greg Universe, and there was the decision to have a child, and there was Steven. The child she created was also in some ways an act of ending. Not of dying, gems don't die, but of stopping. Choosing to give up the physical form, to transfer the gem to the child, to cease to be rose quartz and to instead become, in some cellular sense, the person Steven would grow up to be. She chose to stop carrying the lie. She chose to put the gem in new hands. Whether she chose this because she was tired of the weight of it, or because she genuinely believed Steven would be a better version of what she had been, or because she wanted something to exist that was free of her history, or all of these things at once, is not something the show resolves. It gives you the question clearly and leaves the answer appropriately unclear, because it is the kind of question that people who love complicated things ask about those things, and the show respects the difficulty too much to simplify it. But here is what you will think about on a second watch, when you know Every time a character talks to Rose Quartz in a memory, in a flashback, in a recorded message and tells her she was wonderful, that she was extraordinary, that she made them feel seen and loved and alive, you will wonder what she felt when they said it. Whether she accepted it cleanly or whether some part of her kept a running tab of the things she had not told them. Whether love received under false pretenses feels like love, or whether it feels, at some level, like a very gentle version of the same thing that corrupted the earth. A taking of something that wasn't quite offered. A presence built on an absence. Whether she was happy, you will wonder that. You will wonder if she was happy. Section 4. Rose Quartz, the beautiful lie and the real damage. There is something the show does that is genuinely brave, and it is this. It refuses to let you hate Rose Quartz. It also refuses to let you love her without complication. It holds both possibilities in the same hand, and it makes you sit with the discomfort of that, because the discomfort is the point. Rose Quartz is the most discussed character in the Steven Universe fandom, the most analyzed, the most argued over, the most written about in late-night posts by people who cannot quite articulate why they feel so conflicted about a fictional alien, and the reason for that is simple. She is the show's most honest portrait of something true and difficult. That people who cause genuine harm are often also people who contain genuine love, and that these two things coexist without resolving each other. Let's talk about what Rose did right, because it was real and it mattered. She saw Earth when no one in her civilization would look at it. She saw the organic life there, and she recognized it as worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth giving up everything she was supposed to be in order to preserve. She started a rebellion against the most powerful force in the known universe, with essentially no military training and no institutional backing, and only the conviction that something was worth saving. She inspired loyalty extraordinary, lasting, deep loyalty in every being she encountered. Gems who met her became, in many cases, fundamentally different. They stopped believing they were only what their function said they were. They started believing they could choose. That is an enormous gift to give. She loved Greg Universe with what everyone who witnessed it describes as complete and genuine presence. Steven's father speaks of her not with the soft nostalgia of someone idealizing the past, but with the specific, particular love of someone describing someone they actually knew. He remembers her curiosity about humanity. He remembers her asking him questions about his life and his family and his feelings, with an intensity that made him feel, perhaps for the first time, entirely seen. He remembers that she could be ridiculous, laughing, surprising. He describes falling in love with her as the most logical thing that had ever happened to him, because being near her made the world feel more possible. She made a videotape for Steven before she became him. She sat in front of a camera in what looks like a very old forest, trying to figure out how the camera worked, asking Pearl if it was on, and then when it was looking into the lens and trying to say something real to a person who didn't exist yet. That tape, when Steven watches it for the first time in the episode Lion 3, straight to video, is one of the most emotionally precise things in the series. She is clearly nervous. She is clearly trying to get it right and knowing she won't fully manage to. She tells him he is going to be something the world has never had before. She tells him she loves him already. She tells him that her gem is all she can give him and that everything he is will be his own, and then she says she is sorry. Just that. Just, I'm sorry. Without specifying what for. Without specifying what for, she knew. She was apologizing for something she was choosing not to name. She was choosing, even in this final message, even in this one opportunity to be completely honest, to leave the specific items off the list. You can spend a long time thinking about why. Maybe she ran out of time. Maybe she did not know where to start. Maybe she understood, with the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years, that there were things Steven would need to find for himself, that a list of her sins, delivered to him before he had the context to understand them, would do more damage than the silences she was leaving. Or maybe she was, even at the end, more comfortable with the idea of being loved for who she was trying to be than being fully known for who she had been. Because here is what she did not tell him about. She did not tell him about Pearl's compulsion. About the direct diamond command she had given Pearl thousands of years before the command that she could not speak the truth about Pink Diamond, that would still be operating, still tormenting Pearl, still preventing the most important truth from being told for years after his birth. She did not give Pearl any way out of it. She did not leave a note, a permission, a recording saying, "When Stephen is old enough, you can tell him." She simply left. And Pearl remained unable to speak. You will watch Pearl throughout the entire series, especially in the early seasons, before you know what she is carrying, and you will see her struggling with something. You will see her deflect questions, change the subject, leave rooms when certain topics come up. You will see her look at Steven sometimes with an expression that contains several things at once: love, grief, a longing to say something, and a kind of paralysis. The first time through, you probably attribute this to her grief over Rose, her complicated feelings about the child who replaced the person she loved. The second time through, knowing what you know, it is something much harder to watch. It is someone being tortured by a command they cannot lift, trapped in a loyalty that was weaponized against them, unable to perform even the most basic act of care, telling a child the truth because the person they loved most in the universe had decided, a very long time ago, that this specific truth was not to be told. And then there is Bismuth. Bismuth deserves her own section and will get one, but she cannot be separated from the accounting of Rose's choices. Rose sealed Bismuth in a bubble and stored her in Lion's dimension and told the rest of the crystal gems that Bismuth had been lost in battle. Bismuth was not lost in battle. Bismuth and Rose had a disagreement, a real, substantive, morally serious disagreement about whether the crystal gems should use a weapon capable of permanently ending a gem's existence, and Rose, who did not want to have that argument and did not want to acknowledge that Bismuth might have a point, made the disagreement stop by making Bismuth stop. She poofed her and put her in a bubble and hid her away for millennia and lied to everyone. Bismuth had fought beside Rose, had believed in her, had given everything she had to a cause she genuinely believed in. And when she pushed back, when she said something Rose did not want to hear, Rose's response was to make her disappear. The other crystal gems never found her. They believed the lie. Garnet, who had future vision and could see across probability, never knew. Amethyst, who was playful and warm and would have loved Bismuth fiercely, never knew. For 5,000 years, Bismuth existed in a bubble in a pocket dimension inside a pink lion, alive but completely absent from the world she had dedicated herself to protecting because the leader of the revolution had decided she was more convenient stored away than engaged with. When Stephen frees Bismuth accidentally and she learns the truth, not just that she was bubbled by Rose, but the larger truth, the truth about who Rose really was, her reaction, is one of the most devastating moments in the show. She does not scream. She does not rage, or not only rage. She makes a dark joke about how she built a weapon to shatter the leader of Homeworld, and it turns out she basically designed it for Rose herself. There is something in that moment of dark humor that is recognizable to anyone who has ever been betrayed by something they loved. The exhausted irony of it. The particular cruelty of discovering that the thing you gave everything for was, in some essential way, not what you were told it was. Rose also, over her thousands of years on Earth after the war, caught and bubbled hundreds of corrupted gems. They are in the temple's basement when the series begins, a room full of pink bubbles, each one containing a gem who was once a person, who was once someone Rose knew, someone who fought beside her or against her, who has been something other than themselves for thousands of years. Rose kept them there. She did not cure them. She could not cure them with her healing tears, which could restore a gem from physical damage but could not touch the corruption, which was a diamond-level phenomenon. But she also did not try anything else, as far as we know. She did not pursue a cure. She stored the problem in a room and kept it contained and moved on. You could argue this was practical, there was no cure available, and storing them was better than letting them rampage across the earth. And that is true. It was better. But it was also, over thousands of years, a kind of not looking. She knew those gems. Some of them had names. Some of them had fought beside her, believed in her, followed her into a war that ended with them trapped in a form they could not understand. And they were in the basement. And she was on the beach, watching the ocean. The show never asks Rose directly about this. It cannot. She is gone before the story begins. What it does instead is let the weight of the basement be present in the background of the series, let the bubble gems be there when Stephen starts looking into them, let him be the one who actually tries to do something. Stephen, who is 11 years old when the show begins, does more for the corrupted gems in the series run, actively communicating with Centipedal, partially restoring her, advocating for them, eventually helping lead the cure than Rose appears to have done in thousands of years. That is not an accident. The show is very deliberate about what it chooses to contrast. And then there is Spinel, who waited 6,000 years in a garden because Pink Diamond told her to stay and never came back. Spinel does not appear in the main series. She appears in the 2019 film, which is set 2 years after the show's finale, and her arrival is the engine of the film's plot. She has a world-ending weapon and a broken heart and a personality that oscillates between manic joy and absolute despair, in the way of someone who has been alone for so long that they no longer have access to a stable middle. Register. She was built to be a companion. She was built for exactly one thing, being present for someone who wanted her. And for 6,000 years, she was present for no one, in a garden that grew strange around her while she stood perfectly still in the spot where Pink Diamond had left her. What Pink Diamond intended, the show declines to answer cleanly. The most generous reading is that she forgot that she was young and distracted and consumed by the rebellion, and Spinel simply slipped out of her mind, the way young people sometimes let things slip, and that it was thoughtlessness rather than malice. The less generous reading is that Spinel represented the life Pink Diamond was trying to leave the companion given to her by Homeworld, the relationship that had been arranged for her rather than chosen, and that not going back was a choice, not a forgetting. That Pink Diamond, in becoming Rose Quartz, needed to shed the things that belonged to Pink Diamond, and Spinel was one of them. Both readings are available. The show leaves both doors open. The forget-me-nots growing in the garden, those flowers that are named in every human language where they exist, specifically for the act of not forgetting, are either a coincidence or a statement or a piece of private guilt that Pink Diamond planted and could not remove from the story of what she did. We do not know. The show knows. We do not know. It put those flowers there deliberately and then said nothing about them, the way you put a thing in a room and leave it for someone else to decide what it means. The moral ledger of Rose Quartz is the one the show opens in its very first season, the mystery at the center of everything and can never quite close. Not because it fails to examine her honestly, but because honest examination leads not to a verdict, but to a weight. Rose caused suffering to specific people who loved her. She also inspired in those same people and in others, and in Earth itself, a kind of hope that would not have existed without her. Both of these things are fully true, and they do not cancel each other out. Steven will eventually be able to say out loud that he is angry at her. Not just sad, angry. His therapist in the follow-up series Steven Universe Future helps him find that, and it is one of the most quietly significant things in the whole run of the show. Because it gives permission to feel the complicated thing rather than the simple thing. Because loving someone and being furious at what they did to you is not a contradiction. It is very often the most honest possible response. The tape ends. She says she loves him. She says she is sorry. The screen goes dark. And whatever she was going to say next, whatever was still in her, goes with her into the gem in his stomach and stays there. Section 5. Pearl, a self that was never her own. Pearl's story is the one that gets heavier with each rewatch faster than almost any other in the show, because the first time you watch you see grief, and the second time you see imprisonment, and the third time you see something harder to name, the portrait of a person who was not given the conditions to form a self in the first place, and who spent thousands of years trying to build one out of devotion to someone else, and then had even that taken away, and had to start from nothing, at what felt like the end of everything. Let's start at the actual beginning, which the show gives us only in fragments, but which is enough to understand the structure of the wound. Pearls are made in a place called the Reef. They are not grown in kindergartens like other gems. They are crafted, carefully, with attention to detail and aesthetics, because a pearl's purpose is to be beautiful and present and owned. The Reef is described as a manufacturing facility, but the word manufacturing doesn't quite capture what it is, which is a place where beings with interiority are produced specifically to have that interiority trained out of them before they ever get a chance to use it. A pearl is taught, from the moment of her creation, that she exists for someone else. She holds things. She stands quietly. She is decorative. She does not have opinions, does not express preferences, does not contradict her owner. She is a living object, which is a thing that should be a contradiction in terms, but which the gem civilization had managed to make feel entirely normal. The caste system has a way of doing that, taking things that should horrify and naturalizing them, presenting them as the order of things, the way things are, the way things have always been. Pearl our Pearl, the one in the show, Steven's pearl belonged to Pink Diamond, or Pink Diamond was given Pearl. The transaction runs both ways, and the direction you phrase it in says something about how you think about consent in the context of manufacture. Pearl was made for Pink Diamond. She was not asked if she wanted to be. She was not given the opportunity to decline. She was Pearl, and Pearl belonged to someone, and that was the entirety of her possible existence. And then something unusual happened. Pink Diamond was unusual, we established this, and her relationship with her Pearl became, over time, something that didn't fit the standard framework. They spent centuries together. They talked, actually talked, in the way that you only talk to someone when you think of them as a person. Pink Diamond told Pearl things she told no one else. Pearl knew the interior of Pink Diamond's mind in the way that only sustained closeness produces. When Pink Diamond needed someone to play the role of Rose Quartz, killing a diamond, the most dangerous act either of them would ever perform, Pearl was the one she trusted to do it, because Pearl knew her. Because Pearl was, in the truest sense, her person. But the fact that Pink Diamond trusted Pearl and spent centuries with her and arguably loved her does not change what Pearl was. It does not change the structure of their relationship. Pink Diamond could command Pearl, and Pearl could not disobey. That is not a metaphor. It is not a description of the social dynamics of their relationship. It is a literal, physical, built-in condition of Pearl's existence. Pearl cannot disobey a direct command from the gem she belongs to. That is what a Pearl is. And Pink Diamond, in the moment of creating her new identity as Rose Quartz, in the moment of choosing to become someone else entirely, gave Pearl a command. Never tell anyone the truth about Pink Diamond. Never reveal who Rose Quartz really was. Never speak of this. And Pearl carried that command for thousands of years. Think about what that means in practice. Pearl was present for the entire war. She fought beside the crystal gems, who did not know who Rose really was. She watched Garnet form and be accepted by Rose and come to trust Rose completely. She watched Amethyst emerge from the kindergarten and be folded into the crystal gem family and love Rose with the straightforward wholeness of someone who had never been given reason to distrust her. She watched humans live and die and live again for generations on a planet they would never know had almost been consumed. She held all of it, all the weight of everything that was true that she was not permitted to say, for millennia in silence. There is a scene, one of the most painful in the show, which you will see differently after you know what Pearl is carrying in the episode The Answer, which tells the story of how Ruby and Sapphire met and how Garnet first formed. In that story, Pearl is present. She is there with Rose at a formal homeworld function. She is playing a role. She and Rose are performing a version of themselves for homeworld observers. And she is doing it with competence, with the practiced ease of someone who has been performing for a very long time. She is also, if you look at her expression, in the brief moments when no one is looking at her, enormously tired. The second time you watch this scene, you see the exhaustion that first viewing attributed to formality or staging. It is the exhaustion of someone who has been lying for so long that the lying has become the entirety of their visible life. Who they are to the world is now entirely constructed. Whatever was underneath is compressed down to something very small and very quiet that only comes out in the moments when no one is looking. The command Pearl was under the order from Pink Diamond not to reveal the truth about Pink Diamond's identity was specific, but its effects were not. In the show's logic, the kind of command a diamond can give a pearl does not just prevent the specific words from being spoken, it prevents the attempt. When Garnet or Amethyst or Steven asks Pearl things that are adjacent to the forbidden truth, Pearl experiences what appears to be a physical inability to respond. She glitches, her voice cuts out, she starts a sentence and cannot finish it. She leaves rooms. She redirects. She changes the subject with such determined urgency that everyone can tell something is wrong, but no one can understand what it is, because the thing that's wrong is a secret she is unable to tell, which means they cannot know what question would even unlock it. Pearl is, across the entirety of the first 4 seasons of the show, living in a state of permanent, compelled silence about the single most important truth in the series. And she cannot tell anyone that she cannot tell them. She cannot say, "There is something I am forbidden to tell you," and the forbidding is destroying me, and I have been carrying this longer than you have been alive. She cannot say any of it. She can only stand there, beautiful and competent and organized and devastated, and hold it. This is Rose's doing, not with malice, not with the intention to harm Pearl, but with the particular carelessness of someone who is very powerful and very in need, and who does not, at the moment of making the request, fully account for what it will cost the person they are asking it of. Rose needed the secret kept. Pearl was the only one who could keep it. Rose gave the command, and the command held. And Pearl paid the price of it for longer than most civilizations last. Now add to this. Pearl loved Rose, not in the composed, dutiful way of a servant who has made peace with their role. She loved her completely, deeply, in the specific way of someone who has been in close proximity to another person for centuries and has allowed herself to become entirely oriented around that person. The show is careful about how it handles this. It does not flatten it into a simple romantic love, though there are clear elements of that. It presents it as something larger and more complicated, a devotion that had become structural, that had organized Pearl's sense of self around the presence of someone else, that had made Pearl's question of, who am I, dependent on the answer to the question of, who does Rose need me to be? Pearl was Rose's knight, her soldier, her confidant, her co-conspirator, her best friend in every way that the word can be meant. And Rose chose Greg. Rose fell in love with a human man who was, by any external measure, nothing. A van-dwelling musician who sang covers at a barn and had no special powers and would grow old and die in a time frame that was, from Rose's perspective, basically a weekend. Rose fell in love with him and chose to have Stephen with him, and in doing so chose the path that would end her existence as Rose Quartz. Pearl understood intellectually that Rose loved her. Rose told her so. But Rose also told Greg she loved him, and Rose told every crystal gem she loved them, and Rose told the corrupted gems in the basement's bubbles she was sorry, in the way that you speak to a room full of people who cannot hear you. Rose's love was vast and it was real, and it was also, perhaps, not specific enough to function as the thing Pearl needed it to be, which was exclusionary, which was mine, which was the love that chose you above the others. The song It's Over, Isn't It, sung by Pearl in Season 3, standing on a hill in the wind, watching a spaceship, is one of the finest pieces of writing in the show and one of the most efficient acts of characterization I have encountered in any animated series. It is 3 minutes long. In those 3 minutes, Pearl moves through a grief that the show had been building for 3 seasons without naming it clearly. She describes Rose as a mystery she was never meant to solve. She describes herself as someone who was always going to lose because she was fighting for something she could not hold. She describes the particular torture of watching the person you love choose someone else and knowing that the choosing was real, that the person who chose is not wrong, and that you cannot stop loving them anyway. What the song does not say directly, but what every second viewing makes unmistakable, Pearl is not just grieving Rose's decision to be with Greg. She is grieving that she was never in the running. She was never the kind of thing that could be in the running. Pearl was Rose's pearl, which meant Rose's love for her was always going to be structural, always going to be colored by the nature of what Pearl was made for, always going to be, at some fundamental level, the love of an owner for a possession rather than the love of a person for a person. And Pearl cannot even hold that against Rose entirely, because Rose was the one who tried to change that. Rose was the one who told Pearl she was more than her function, who invited her to fight and choose and be. But the conditions of Pearl's creation did not go away just because Rose said they should. You cannot simply declare someone free if the structure of their existence is still designed for ownership. After Rose becomes Stephen, Pearl is adrift. The mission is gone. The person is gone. The command, the terrible, binding command to keep the secret is still there, operating without its source, active without anyone to enforce it but the structure of Pearl's own creation, which is permanent. Pearl is carrying a secret for a person who no longer exists. And she is alone in the way that a person is alone when the center of their gravity disappears and they find themselves still in orbit, still circling, around an absence. She throws herself into Stephen, into the crystal gems, into the work of protecting the earth, into training Stephen, into being organized and competent and present. It is not nothing. It is, in fact, a lot. But it is also a strategy for not having to answer the question of what Pearl is when she is not in relation to someone else, a question she has never had to answer before, a question that she may not have the tools to answer, because every tool she was given was designed for a different purpose. There is a small, easily missed moment in the episode Last One Out of Beach City, in which Pearl meets a young woman at a concert. The woman has short pink hair. She does not look much like Rose, not specifically, but there is something in the bearing, the posture, the coloring, that makes Pearl stop and look. The woman gives Pearl her phone number. Pearl, who has never had a phone, acquires one specifically to be able to call that number, and then she doesn't call it, or the show doesn't show us if she does. That thread is left open at the end of the series, the number in the phone, uncalled or called without us seeing. Another of those small human-scaled mysteries that the bigger story doesn't have room for. What it represents is Pearl at the very beginning of the project of becoming a self that is not in service of someone else. Noticing someone. Being noticed. Holding the possibility of something new. It is a small, tentative, entirely right moment, and the show leaving it unresolved is either an oversight or a very deliberate choice to leave Pearl's future genuinely open to show us the door without walking her through it, because whether she walks through it is her choice. And the show has always been more interested in the possibility of choice than in predetermining its outcomes. Pearl deserved more time. The show, working within the constraints of what a children's animated series can sustain, gave her what it could. But Pearl's story, the real full weight of it, is the story of a person who was not given the conditions to form a self, who tried to grow one anyway inside the shape of devotion to someone else, who had that devotion not repaid in kind, who lost even the person she had devoted herself to, who carried a secret for them for thousands of years after they were gone, and who is, at the end of everything, still standing on the beach with a phone in her hand, looking at the horizon. Still standing. Still here, that is Pearl. Still here, and the horizon still there, and the morning, for the first time in a long time, genuinely open. Section 6. Garnet and the Forbidden Existence. Garnet is the one who knows things. This is how she is introduced: stoic, decisive, quiet, in the particular way of someone who has already seen the outcome and is waiting for events to catch up. She has future vision, which means she can see probability trees stretching out from any given moment, multiple possible futures overlapping each other until the actual path declares itself. She uses this quietly, practically, without drama. She will tell Steven something is going to be fine, and he will believe her, because she has access to information he does not. She will make a call that seems strange and will later turn out to have been exactly right. She is the leader of the Crystal Gems in the present day, and her leadership is grounded not in authority or aggression, but in a depth of knowledge of the future, of the past, of the cost of things that no one else fully has. For the first full season of the show, this is most of what you know about Garnet. She is composed. She is powerful, easily the most physically powerful of the Crystal Gems, able to punch through mountains, to survive situations that would shatter anyone else. She has a deep, even voice and square-tipped boots, and she hugs Steven with a completeness that suggests she has thought about what it means to hold someone and decided to do it fully. She is, in the most straightforward sense, safe. Being near Garnet feels like being near something stable in a world full of uncertainty. And then, at the end of Season 1, in the episode Jailbreak, you find out what Garnet is. She is a fusion. She is two gems, Ruby and Sapphire, who fell in love during a chance encounter thousands of years ago and have been fused together, voluntarily and permanently, ever since. This is the secret at the center of Garnet's existence, and it is a secret because on Homeworld, what Ruby and Sapphire are to each other is not permitted. Fusions between gems of different types are treated by Homeworld as an abomination, a violation of the natural order, a degradation of both gems' purity of purpose, an embarrassing mess that needs to be unmade. Fusions are only acceptable in very specific contexts. Gems of the same type fusing temporarily for combat purposes, for example. But a Ruby and a Sapphire, two gems of entirely different castes and functions, fusing not for combat but for love, and choosing to remain fused, and building a life out of that fusion, this is a crime, in Homeworld's framework. This is the kind of crime that gets corrected by destruction. The story of how Ruby and Sapphire first fused is told in the episode The Answer, which is framed as a bedtime story that Garnet tells Steven, and which is one of the most beautiful episodes in the entire series. A Ruby, just one of a group of low-status soldiers, interchangeable, not meant to matter, is assigned to guard a Sapphire who has been brought to Earth on official homeworld business. Something goes wrong. In an attempt to protect the Sapphire from a crystal gem attack, the Ruby reaches out, and in that reaching, something happens that has never happened before to either of them. They fuse. The fusion is immediate. It is, visually, a perfect expression of what the show thinks love is. Two people moving toward each other and creating something new that is greater than either of them individually. Garnet, in that first moment, is confused and disoriented and new, in the way of any new thing. She does not know yet what she is. She knows only that she feels something she has never felt before. The Sapphire's future vision shows her only two possible futures from this moment. She stays on homeworld and is punished, or she runs. She chooses to run. She takes the Ruby that is now also a part of her when they are fused, and she runs to Earth, to the crystal gems, to Rose Quartz, who greets them with that wide, specific smile that everyone who knew Rose remembers and says, essentially, "You are welcome here, exactly as you are." That welcome is the foundation of Garnet's existence. Rose accepted what Ruby and Sapphire were before they fully understood it themselves. She told them they didn't need to be anything other than what they chose to be. She gave them, in the way she was best at giving things, permission. And Garnet, who was not yet called Garnet, who was still figuring out what name applied to this new form, this new being that was both two people and one person simultaneously took that permission and built a life out of it. Here is what that life required: sustained, continuous love. Garnet is only Garnet as long as Ruby and Sapphire choose each other, every moment, in the specific active way that fusion requires. Fusion in Steven Universe is not passive. It is not a state you fall into and remain in without effort. It is an ongoing act of communication and harmony, and when that harmony breaks when Ruby and Sapphire fight, or panic, or stop trusting each other even temporarily, Garnet destabilizes, falls apart, becomes two separate people again, confused and blinking in the light, having to find their way back to each other. The show gives us a moment of this in the episode Keystone Motel, which is at first glance a somewhat light episode. Steven and Greg take a road trip with the gems. There's a motel, there's a pool. There are the kind of small domestic moments the show is very good at, and then underneath it, something darker. Ruby and Sapphire are fighting. They have separated and they are each processing the fight in their own way. Ruby running hot and Sapphire going cold. And neither of them is handling it well, and neither of them wants to be the one to reach first. And in the meantime, Garnet is not there. The leader is absent. The most stable presence in the crystal gems is gone, because the two people who make her up cannot currently reach each other. What the episode does quietly is show you the cost of the constant act of being Garnet. The world Steven lives in depends, in ways he has not fully articulated to himself, on Ruby and Sapphire being willing to keep choosing each other. There is no Garnet without that choice, made fresh every moment. It is the most demanding kind of love, not the love that you decide on once and maintain out of inertia, but the love that has to be recommitted to continuously, that requires both people to show up, that cannot coast. And it exists under the shadow of what Homeworld thinks about it. Homeworld has been very clear about what Ruby and Sapphire's relationship is, in their framework, wrong, an error, a debasement of what both of them are supposed to be. The civilization that shaped both of them, the hierarchy that assigned their roles and their values and their understanding of what they were for, has declared their love a violation. And while the crystal gems do not believe that Rose's acceptance was real and Amethyst and Pearl love Garnet and would be horrified by the Homeworld view, Ruby and Sapphire have still been shaped, in part, by the world that made them. The belief that what they are is wrong is not something you simply discard because one person told you otherwise. It lives in you, in the structure of how you think about yourself, long after the external voice has stopped saying it out loud. There is a moment, during the Season 5 arc on Homeworld, where Ruby and Sapphire are separated by force, and Homeworld treats their reunion, their choosing to fuse again, right there in front of a formal Homeworld court, as an act of rebellion. And it is an act of rebellion. It is also, in the most personal sense, just two people who love each other finding each other. The show holds both of those things at once, which is one of the things it does best. Something can be both politically significant and deeply private, and the significance does not swallow the privacy. Their wedding, which aired in the episode Reunited and was, as mentioned, the first same-sex wedding to be depicted in a children's animated series on American television, is modest and beautiful, and takes place in the Crystal Gems front yard, with Beach City residents looking on and not entirely understanding what they are witnessing. Ruby wears a tuxedo, Sapphire wears a dress. They exchange words that are not formal vows, but which function as vows in the way that real words, sincerely spoken, always do. And then they fuse, and Garnet is back, and the wedding celebration immediately becomes a crisis because a homeworld ship arrives, which is very on brand for the Crystal Gems. But the wedding happened. They chose each other in front of everyone, with full knowledge of what that choice had cost in the past and what it might still cost. That is the deepest possible version of what the show means when it talks about choice, not the choice you make when it's easy, but the choice you make when you know the price and you pay it anyway, because the alternative is a self that isn't yours. Garnet spent the first 2 seasons of the show keeping her nature private from Steven. Not deceptively, not in the way of someone with something shameful to hide, but in the way of someone who is not sure a child is ready to understand what they are, or who perhaps needs to be ready themselves before they can explain it. When she finally tells him in Jailbreak, in the song Stronger Than You, which she sings while fighting Jasper with a ferocity and a joy that is one of the show's great moments, it is not a confession. It is a declaration. She sings it as Garnet, entirely Garnet, to an enemy who is trying to use fusion as a weapon and who cannot understand why Garnet fights the way she does, which is as someone who has nothing to prove and everything to be. I am made of love, she sings. And she means it as a fact, not a sentiment. She is literally, physically, materially made of love. Love is the substance she is constructed from. The enemy cannot understand this. Most enemies can't. Love is, in the logic of Homeworld, a weakness, a distraction, a vulnerability, a deviation from function. In the logic of the Crystal Gems, and specifically, in the lived proof of Garnet's existence, love is a structural force. It is load-bearing. It is what holds things together that would otherwise fall apart. What the show leaves open about Garnet, and it is worth naming, is the question of what Ruby and Sapphire are as individuals, separate from each other. In the long run, we see them apart occasionally. We see Ruby's warmth and her impulsiveness, the way she runs hot emotionally and loves with her whole nervous system. We see Sapphire's reserve, her tendency towards stillness, the way her future vision can tip into fatalism if she isn't careful, the idea that if you can already see how it goes, why bother with the middle? Both of them are clearly full people. Both of them have interiority and specific personality and things they are working through, but we rarely see them apart for long. They tend to come back to each other quickly because the pull toward fusion is very strong when you have been fused for thousands of years. The show does not dwell on what it costs them individually to maintain the relationship, whether there are things Ruby wants that Garnet cannot contain, or things Sapphire needs that the fusion makes harder to access. It gestures at this without fully exploring it, because the show's commitment is ultimately to the validity of their love, and exploring the friction in too much detail risks, in the show's framework, undermining that commitment. It is a choice. The show makes it deliberately. And it means Garnet's story ends warmly, stably, with Ruby and Sapphire choosing each other again and again, and Garnet being the living result of that choosing, which is the most beautiful possible version of the story. The harder version, the version where the individual costs of the relationship are fully accounted for, lives in the space between what is shown. Garnet is made of love. That is true, and it is wonderful. And somewhere inside that love, Ruby is running a little too hot, and Sapphire is holding a future she can't quite let go of. And the work of being Garnet is the endless, daily, magnificent work of bridging the distance between them. It never stops being work. That is not a failing. That is the most honest thing the show says about love. It is a choice, not a state, and the choosing is never finished, and that is exactly as it should be. Section 7. Amethyst and the crime of being born late. If Pearl's wound is having been given a self that was never her own, and Garnet's is having built a self that the world declared illegitimate, then Amethyst's is simpler in its shape and no less corrosive for that simplicity. She was born wrong, and she knew it very early, and she has never entirely stopped knowing it. The facts of her emergence are these. She was grown in the prime kindergarten, the one in the American desert, the main gem production facility that Homeworld had established on Earth before the war interrupted everything. She was grown in a chamber, like all gems, incubating in the rock, drawing her material from the planet. But something went wrong with the timing. Maybe the war disrupted the process. Maybe there was a shortage of the material she needed, because the war had been running for a long time and the resources were depleted. Maybe the circumstances in her particular chamber were different. Whatever the reason, Amethyst stayed underground too long. A standard amethyst, the kind Homeworld wanted, the kind the kindergarten was designed to produce, would be large, tall, powerful, built for combat in the way that Quartz soldiers are built, oversized by human standards, imposing, physically dominating. Amethyst came out small, short, underpowered by the standards of her gem type. She emerged, blinking, into an Earth that was already past the war, already changed, already populated by 3 crystal gems, who had survived the corruption and were doing their best to manage the aftermath of a civilization that had been taken from them. Rose found her. She was just there, in the kindergarten, confused and alone and with no idea what she was supposed to be, in a place that had been abandoned by the people who built it. Rose took her in. The crystal gems became her family. She grew up in whatever sense a gem grows up with people who loved her. The warmth she found with the crystal gems was real and it was genuine, and it formed the bedrock of who she is. Someone who loves loudly and fights hard and finds joy in the most unexpected places. But Homeworld's standard for what an amethyst should be doesn't disappear just because it isn't enforced. Amethyst knows, has always known, what she was supposed to be. She knows that the version of herself she walks around in is smaller than designed, less powerful than expected, in some measurable technical sense defective. The Prime Kindergarten produced other amethysts. They show up later in the series on Homeworld, and they are everything she is not: tall, broad, powerful, confident in the way of things that were made correctly and know it. When Amethyst meets them, the encounter is one of the show's most quietly devastating, because she stands next to what she was supposed to be and it is just standing there, visible, not doing anything except existing, and it is enough to make her small again, in a way that all the warmth of the crystal gems cannot entirely reach. Jasper is the worst version of this. Jasper, who emerged from the Beta Kindergarten, a different, less optimal production site, used hastily during the war to produce soldiers, quickly emerged oversized rather than undersized. The Beta Kindergarten's relative shallowness in the rock produced gems who were, paradoxically, larger and more physically powerful than the standard. Jasper was the last gem produced there, and she came out enormous and ferocious, and she has spent her entire existence defining herself through that physical power, through the idea that being the biggest and the strongest is the highest possible value a gem can embody. When Jasper and Amethyst are in the same space, the contrast is explicitly noted. They are both quartz gems from Earth. They are, in a very literal genealogical sense, sisters made from the same planet, designed for similar purposes, shaped by the same geological forces. But one of them is what the function demands, and one of them is not, and Jasper makes sure Amethyst knows which is which. There is an episode called Earthlings in which Amethyst fights Jasper, and the fight is not just a fight. It is Amethyst fighting for the right to be what she is, against the part of herself that has internalized the Homeworld judgment of what she was supposed to be. Jasper tells her she is a mistake, that she is what happens when the process fails, that her very existence is evidence of inadequacy. And Amethyst has to fight not just Jasper, but the piece of herself that half believes this, the piece that was built in the wrong chamber and has been hearing that verdict since before she knew there was a verdict being delivered. She wins. She fuses with Steven a fusion that should not be possible, a human and a gem creating something new together, an act that is in itself a violation of every Homeworld rule about what fusion is for, and she wins. And the victory is emotional as much as physical. It is the victory of deciding that what you actually are is more valid than what you were supposed to be. But here is the detail the show slips in quietly, that you notice on second viewing and then cannot unnotice: Amethyst's coping strategies. Her relationship to her own identity is not entirely healthy, even before we get to the jasper of it all. She shapeshifts more than any other crystal gem. Not for combat, not for practical purposes, but recreationally, restlessly, in the way of someone who is uncomfortable in their default form and finds relief in becoming something else temporarily. She can hold other forms longer than Pearl can, longer than gems are typically supposed to be able to, and the show presents this as an amusing quirk without fully dwelling on what it suggests. That the body she was born with does not feel entirely like home. She eats things, not because gems need to eat, they do not. They derive energy from their gems, but because she likes the experience, and more specifically because eating is something humans do, and she grew up on Earth among humans, and there is a part of her that identifies with the organic life of the planet in a way that is more than just affinity. She is from Earth. Not in the sense that Pearl and Garnet are from Earth, which is to say beings who arrived on it and chose it. In the sense that she was made from it, literally, pulled from its rocks, carrying its mineral record inside her. Earth is her parent, in the most material sense possible. This makes her relationship with the kindergarten, when she eventually has to confront it as an adult, a complicated one. The kindergarten is where she came from, and the kindergarten represents everything Homeworld did wrong on Earth. It is dead land. It is drained ground. It is the physical evidence of extraction, and she came out of it. She is, in one of the show's more uncomfortable implications, made of what was taken from the Earth. She carries the cost of the colonization literally inside her. She does not think about this constantly. She is not by nature a person who sits with heavy things for long. She bounces. She deflects. She makes jokes at exactly the moment when a joke would create enough distance from the feeling that she doesn't have to go into it. The show is honest about this as a coping strategy, rather than presenting it simply as personality. Amethyst is funny, and she is warm, and she is also someone who runs from the inside of herself with more velocity and creativity than almost anyone else in the Crystal Gems. When she does sit with things in the quieter episodes, the episodes that are specifically about her, the show handles her interiority with tremendous care. There is a scene in the episode On the Run where she and Steven are in the kindergarten, and she has a breakdown that is real and raw and entirely earned by everything the show has been building toward. She is tired of pretending that where she came from doesn't matter, that the fact of her defective emergence doesn't live in the background of every interaction, that she can look at the dead land around the kindergarten and not feel like she is looking at evidence of her own birth's cost. She says things she has never said, to Steven, who does not fully understand but who loves her without condition, which is what she needs. She does not resolve, she moves forward. This is the show's consistent position on healing. You do not fix the wound, you learn to carry it differently, you find people who will help you hold it. You keep going. Amethyst keeps going. She joins the Crystal Gems in every battle, trains harder than she is given credit for, loves Steven with a fierceness that occasionally manifests as roughhousing but is never not love. She is one of the most alive characters in the show, alive in the sense of present, reactive, feeling things loudly and without apology. What the show cannot quite give her, within the constraints of its runtime, is the full resolution of the question the kindergarten raises. She is made from a colonized planet. The crime of that colonization is part of her material history. She did not commit it. She could not have, she wasn't there. But she is the consequence of it, the living product of a process that killed the land around it, and that fact sits in the background of her story in a way the show acknowledges without fully working through. She is small, she is from the wrong chamber, she came out too late and too short, and by every Homeworld metric she is a failure. She is also, by every metric that the show argues actually matters, extraordinary. She is stubborn and creative and warm, and she has made herself, which is not a small thing. She made herself without instructions, without a proper prototype, without anyone who had been an amethyst before her to tell her what being an amethyst was supposed to feel like. She invented it. She built the shape of herself out of the material she had, which was love and chaos and a planet that made her and a family she chose. That is not nothing. That is, arguably, everything. Section 8. The corruption, a scream that lasted 5,000 years. Let me describe what the corruption looks like, from the perspective of someone standing on the earth when it happened. The sky would have changed first. A light, not natural light, not sunlight or moonlight or lightning, but something else, something the human eye had no category for, coming from above and from everywhere and from no direction at once. And with it, a sound. The show does not exactly give us the sound in words, but what the visual language suggests is something below hearing and above it simultaneously, the kind of sound that lives in the chest rather than the ears, the kind that you feel in the base of your ribs before you understand you are hearing it. Every gem on the planet would have felt it differently. For the crystal gems who were hit, there was transformation fast, involuntary, a loss of self that was not like sleep and not like death, but something worse than either. Something that took who you were and left the lights on in the body while removing the person entirely. You would have been aware, in some minimal sense. The show confirms this. The corrupted gems retain something not language, not memory in any accessible form, not personality, but a kind of baseline drive that is not entirely random. They defend territory. They react to familiar stimuli. Centipedal, in the episode Monster Reunion, manages to communicate through drawings, which means that somewhere inside the monstrous form, there was still a being with intention, with memory, with something she was trying to say. That is the corruption. Not death, not sleep. Being removed from yourself while you are still inside, still watching from behind a window you can no longer open. To understand the corruption fully, you have to understand what caused it. And what caused it was grief. Yellow Diamond and Blue Diamond, the two surviving diamonds who had been closest to Pink Diamond in the ordinary operations of the Empire, believed, when the corruption happened, that their youngest sister had been shattered, destroyed, gone permanently, and the corruption was their response to that belief. Not a weapon they decided to deploy, not a strategic decision. It was what happened when two beings of cosmic power could not process what they were feeling, and the feeling came out in the most devastating possible direction. They aimed it at the Earth, at every gem still on Earth when it happened. The target of their grief was the planet where Pink Diamond had died, the rebellion, the scene of the crime, the place where what was lost had been lost. But the target was also, almost incidentally, every crystal gem who had fought in the rebellion, and every homeworld gem who had not evacuated in time, and the organic life of the planet, which was altered by it in ways the show only gestures at, but which appear to include the strange weather phenomena, the lingering gem energy signatures, and the general weirdness of Beach City that has accumulated over thousands of years. Rose Quartz Pink Diamond, the person whose fake death caused all of this, was on Earth when the corruption happened. She was protected, with pearl and garnet, by her shield. She watched it happen. She watched the crystal gems around her transform. She watched the beings she had recruited and inspired and led into a war become something she could no longer reach. And she survived, in the body she had chosen, with her shield up, in the middle of everything she had caused. Think about that for a long time. Because the show does not quite ask you to, and that is something it does sometimes, it gives you the information and trusts you to follow it to the place it leads without being told to go there. She survived. She spent thousands of years after the corruption managing the aftermath. She caught corrupted gems and bubbled them. She preserved what she could. She never found a cure. And she was the only person alive who knew, or should have known, if she thought about it, which she must have, that the reason there was no cure was that the cure required the combined power of all four diamonds, and the diamonds had dispersed, believing they were grieving her, and would not reassemble to heal the corruption because they did not know the corruption could be healed, and would not act on Earth because their grief weapon had worked and they were done. She could have revealed herself. She could have ended the disguise, contacted Yellow and Blue Diamond, told them she was alive, and pursued the cure. This would have been complicated, extremely complicated, involving the unwinding of 1,000 years of cover story and the admission of a faked shattering and the reckoning with what that fake shattering had cost. But it would have been possible, and it might have given thousands of corrupted gems their lives back. She did not do it. This is one of the most uncomfortable things in the show, and the show does not dwell on it. It is in the information, if you follow the chain of causality, but it is not named as Rose's failure, not presented as a specific indictment. The show is too generous with her for that, or possibly too honest about the fact that humans and gems rarely perform the maximally good action when it would require giving up the life they have built and the self they have become. Rose had been Rose Quartz for a very long time. She had built something she loved out of the fiction. Going back to Pink Diamond would have meant giving it up, and she could not make herself do it. So the corrupted gems stayed in the basement, and Pearl stayed silent. And the years passed. The cluster is the corruption's worst chapter. Homeworld, discovering the aftermath of the corruption during some period after the war, finding the Earth covered in corrupted gem beasts rather than cleanly destroyed, as intended, sent scientists to study the phenomenon. What those scientists discovered was that corrupted gems, when their physical forms were destroyed, left behind shards, fragments of gem material, and those shards were still, in some minimal, terrifying sense, alive, not thinking, not feeling, exactly, but existing in the way that a nerve ending removed from a body still conducts electrical impulses for a short time. The shards were residual presence. They were not nothing. The scientists took millions of them, and they fused them together, forcibly, without consent, without any of the conditions that make fusion a meaningful act in the show's cosmology. No communication, no harmony, no love, just compression. Millions of shards pressed together into a single entity, all of them still present in their minimal ghost self-way. All of them still reaching in different directions because they had no way to coordinate. All of them in something that must be understood as pain, even if there is no word for what pain means at that scale. The cluster was buried in the Earth's mantle. It was designed to grow until it emerged an enormous, planet-ending fusion that would shatter the Earth from the inside. A bomb made of people who had been soldiers and rebels and travelers, and the living residents of a planet's worth of history. Used as a raw material, a weapon, because Homeworld had decided they were raw material. Because the system that categorized all organic life as raw material had found a way to extend that logic to the gems themselves, the shards of the dead, the corrupted, the discarded. Steven reaches the cluster through a dream projection ability that is one of his most remarkable and underutilized powers. He goes into the Earth, metaphysically speaking, and he finds it there. Millions of fragments all pulling in different directions, overwhelming noise, the accumulated distress of what was done to them. And he doesn't fight it. He talks to it. He helps it find inside itself a kind of internal arrangement, not healing, not restoration, but something like peace. He helps it bubble itself voluntarily from the inside. He says, "I see you. I hear you. You don't have to keep pulling apart." It is one of the most extraordinary sequences in the show, and it receives, in the broader cultural conversation about Steven Universe, much less attention than it deserves. Because what Steven does with the cluster is the thesis statement of the entire series in miniature. He encounters something in enormous pain, something that has been used and discarded and forced into a form that hurts it, and he does not defeat it or destroy it or contain it with force. He witnesses it. He stays with it. He offers the one thing that the system that made it could never offer: acknowledgement that it exists, that what happened to it was real, that it deserves to be seen. The cluster helps the crystal gems in the final battle, and then the show largely moves on from it. Its ultimate fate is not fully addressed in the healing sequence of the finale. Whether millions of forced-fused shards can be individually restored, given individual forms again, given back anything resembling the lives they had before the show, does not say. It is still down there, in the Earth's mantle, in its voluntary bubble, at a kind of peace. Whether that peace is enough, whether it is justice, whether it is resolution, the show leaves those questions in the dark with it, where they will remain as long as the cluster remains. There are crystal gems the show never names who were corrupted in the initial event, and who Steven encounters as monsters throughout the series. He fights them because they are dangerous in their corrupted form. He eventually helps bubble many of them. He tries to communicate with Centipedal, the corrupted gem who draws frantically on any surface, and whose drawings show a history that she cannot speak. A ship, a planet, the crystal gem symbol, a figure that might be Rose with her arms spread wide in something that could be welcome or apology or both. Centipedal remembers Rose. She draws her. Whatever Rose was to her, before the corruption, it was something. Something specific and personal and not recoverable through the drawings alone. The healing in the finale, when Steven combines his diamond power with yellow, blue, and white, is presented as complete. The light goes out, and the corrupted gems transform, and they are themselves again, blinking in the morning light, looking at each other and at their hands and at the sky. It is beautiful. It earns the warmth it deploys. But 5,000 years. Think about what 5,000 years means in terms of lived experience. Even at the minimal level that the corrupted gems were experiencing, that is longer than all of recorded human history. That is the entire span of time from the first Egyptian hieroglyphics to now. They were in that for all of that. And then the light came, and they were themselves again, and they stood on the beach and looked at each other. What do you do with that? Where do you put it? The show has an ending in which the warmth is real, and the healing is real, and the future is genuinely open. It does not pretend the wound was not as deep as it was. But it also does not follow the corrupted gems into the morning after, does not stay with them as they try to understand what happened to them, as they try to figure out who is still alive and what the world is now, and how you begin to find a life after a 5,000-year interruption. That morning would be enormous. The show gives us its first light and trusts us to imagine the rest. Some things are too large to be fully shown. Some costs are too complete to be fully accounted for on screen. The show knows this, and the choice to end the corruption storyline at the moment of healing rather than the morning after is not an avoidance. It is an acknowledgement that restoration is not the same as recovery, that healing the wound is not the same as processing what the wound was. The crystal gems who were corrupted came back. What comes next for them is theirs. The show is finished, their stories are not. Section 9. Lapis Lazuli and the Cost of Surviving. There is a moment early in the show, Season 1, before most of the big revelations, before the audience fully understands the depth of the mythology, where Steven finds a mirror. It is an old gem artifact, cracked and dusty, with a mirror face that shows things that are not reflections. He takes it home. He talks to it. He tells it about his day, about the crystal gems, about the ocean, and the mirror after a while starts to respond. Not with speech, with images. Images of what Steven says reflected back at him, a communication built from fragments of recorded material. The show treats this as charming and mysterious for most of the episode, and then it becomes something else. Steven realizes there is someone trapped in the mirror, a gem, a living, conscious gem who has been sealed inside a mirror artifact and has been there, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything except reflect what was in front of her, for however long the mirror has been in the crystal gem's possession. This is Lapis Lazuli, and her story is one of the darkest in the series, presented in pieces over many seasons, none of them fully dwelling on the weight of what they are saying. Lapis was a homeworld gem who was on Earth during the war. She was caught, presumably in some piece of wartime chaos, and her gem was cracked, damaged, a crack running through the gemstone that impairs her abilities and her self-expression. She was sealed in the mirror by crystal gem forces. This is confirmed later, mistakenly, or at least without full understanding of what they were doing. The mirror was a tool, a gem artifact that normally records and replays information. Sealing a living gem inside one was apparently either a mistake or a wartime expedient that no one followed up on. She was there, in the mirror, for thousands of years. The crystal gems who sealed her there did not know she was in there, or if any of them knew, the knowledge did not survive the corruption and the chaos of the aftermath. By the time Steven finds the mirror, it is just an old artifact in the crystal gems collection. No one alive knows it contains a person. Pearl, who is meticulous and organized and would be horrified to know she had a living being stored as a storage device, had no idea. Garnet, who can see futures, apparently did not see this one. Amethyst, who was not there for the war, had no information to draw on. Lapis was in the mirror for the entire time the crystal gems were on Earth after the war, managing the aftermath, catching corrupted gems, waiting for something they did not define. She was there, silent, watching Steven grow up in the first few months before the show began through whatever the mirror could perceive. She was there when Steven found her. And when he finally freed her, when he broke the gem out of the mirror casing and held it and said something essentially kind to a being he was only beginning to understand, had been conscious the whole time she was free for. The first time in millennia, she flew away. She used her power control over water, the ability to reshape and direct liquid in enormous quantities to pull the ocean up into a column and fly toward homeworld. She was going home. She was going back to the only other context she had ever known. She was a homeworld gem, and she had been trapped on Earth and she wanted to leave. This is entirely understandable and also a disaster. Because her gem was still cracked, and she was still impaired, and homeworld was not a safe destination for a gem whose information about the political situation was several thousand years out of date. She came back. Her presence in the series becomes something more complicated. Lapis and Jasper are forced into a fusion during a confrontation with homeworld forces. Fusion, as we've established, is in the show's cosmology a deeply personal act. It requires harmony, communication, consent. What happens between Lapis and Jasper is not that. Jasper demands the fusion as a combat strategy and Lapis agrees, but from the beginning there is something wrong with it. The fusion called Malachite is unstable and violent and enormous and terrible, and after a very brief period of existing, Lapis makes a decision that is one of the most extraordinary and most disturbing things in the series. She takes control of the fusion from the inside. She uses her power over water to drag Malachite to the bottom of the ocean and hold it there. She traps Jasper, and she traps herself. She chooses, voluntarily, to become a prison. Her explanation, when she talks about it later, is that she could not let Jasper be free. Jasper was a danger. Jasper would have continued fighting, continued hurting people, and Lapis, with her water control, was the only thing capable of containing her. So she held her. She held them both, at the bottom of the ocean, immobile, for months. The parallels to her own imprisonment are not subtle. The show is not trying to be subtle about them. Lapis was imprisoned for thousands of years, and her response to a threat was to become a prison. She took the shape of what was done to her and used it as a tool, because it was the only tool she could find that was the right size for the problem. Whether she recognized, in the moment, the mirror she was creating, whether it was conscious or whether the shape of the solution was just what her trauma had available, the show does not say. When Malachite is eventually broken apart when Steven and the crystal gems free both Lapis and Jasper from the fusion, Lapis is depleted and exhausted in a way that is not just physical. She spent months being a prison. She spent months in a fusion she had locked herself into by force. She spent months at the bottom of the ocean doing something she had freely chosen to do, and the freedom of the choice doesn't change what it cost her. She comes to live, eventually, with the crystal gems and specifically with Peridot, in the barn outside Beach City. Peridot is a former homeworld technician who had been an antagonist in the early seasons, and who has genuinely changed, genuinely chosen the Earth, genuinely become something different from what she was made to be. Their relationship is one of the show's quieter pleasures. Two gems who had no reason to be friends, who come from radically different backgrounds and have radically different personalities, finding in each other something they hadn't expected. Warmth, in the case of Peridot's relentless enthusiastic analysis of every piece of Earth media she encounters. And something more careful and harder to name, in Lapis a willingness to stay, which for Lapis is not a small thing. Because Lapis has a profound and not entirely resolved difficulty with staying. The show presents this as connected to her trauma without over-explaining it, which is the right choice. She leaves. When the situation becomes threatening, when homeworld forces are approaching, when the context becomes too heavy, Lapis takes the barn and leaves. Not cruelly, not without a goodbye in some versions. But she leaves, because leaving is the one form of control she has that is entirely her own. She was trapped for millennia. She was fused for months. And staying is something that, for her, requires a continuous act of will that she cannot always summon. The show does not resolve this. Lapis's arc does not end with her finding the thing that makes staying feel permanent. She comes back, in the finale, for the fight. She is there. But what she does after, where she goes, what she builds, whether she finds a version of staying that doesn't feel like a cage the show leaves open, which is both honest and frustrating in the specific way of a character whose healing deserved more time. What Steven Universe does well with Lapis is something harder than resolution. It depicts trauma response with specificity. The way a person who has been controlled tries to maintain control of the one thing that can't be taken, which is the ability to leave. The way someone who has been trapped adapts to freedom by keeping the door open at all costs, even if keeping it open means never fully entering the room. The way the shape of old harm finds its way into new choices, not because the person is broken, but because the person is a person, and people are continuous with their histories whether they want to be or not. Lapis Lazuli was trapped in a mirror for thousands of years. She was not supposed to be there. The people who put her there didn't know what they were doing, which does not change what was done. She was released by an 11-year-old who talked to a mirror and treated it with kindness, which is the most Steven Universe possible thing to have happened. and she has been figuring out what freedom means ever since. That project, the project of understanding what freedom is when you have been a long time without it, when the shape of captivity has become part of the shape of yourself, is not a short one. It is probably not a project that ends. It is the kind of work that runs alongside life rather than preceding it, the kind that you do while also doing everything else, while also living in a barn with Peridot and watching terrible television and learning that Earth grows something called a watermelon. She is worth staying with, even when she can't stay herself. Section 10. Steven Universe inheriting everything that was never unpacked. Steven is 12 when the show begins. He will grow through the series not quickly, not in a way that jumps dramatically from season to season, but with the steady accumulation that real growing involves. Bigger in the shoulders, lower in the voice, more visible weight around the eyes. By the time Steven Universe Future concludes, he is 17 or 18, and the distance between who he was at 12 and who he is now is one of the show's most sustained pieces of character work. He is recognizably himself across all of it, the warmth, the impulse toward connection, the instinctive belief that love is a solution, but the version of those qualities at 17 has been tested in ways the 12-year-old had not yet imagined. He was born with his mother's gem in his stomach. This is the central fact of his existence. He is carrying something that was not made for him. Rose's gem is a rose quartz, and it was shaped by Rose's thousands of years of experience, by her power and her history and her accumulated understanding of what she was and what she had done. And it is now embedded in the body of a child who knows almost none of that. The gem is his, it is genetically, structurally, irrevocably his, a part of his biology, but it was shaped before him, and the shaping carries echoes. His powers manifest in ways that are connected to Rose's powers, but not identical to them. He can produce a shield, her primary weapon and symbol, but his shield is pink, where hers was apparently also pink, and his arrives instinctively in moments of threat, rather than being summoned with deliberate intention. He has healing tears, the power that Rose had, that she used to revive Lion, that he would later use to revive Lars, but they come from genuine emotion. He cannot cry on demand and heal things. He has to actually feel it, and the feeling is what activates the power, which means his power is more honest than deliberate, which is possibly the most Steven thing about him. He can project his consciousness into other spaces, into people, sometimes into Connie, in an early episode, in a way that is unsettling and which the show wisely does not play for laughs. Into Lion, who has a portal in his mane, into the cluster, into Watermelon Stevens, which is a long story involving some plant-based duplicates that have more agency than plants are supposed to have. This projective consciousness is never fully explained. It is presented as a Steven-specific power, something that emerges from the hybrid nature of his existence, human mind, gem, material, the combination producing something that neither human nor gem could do alone. He can fuse with humans. This is explicitly impossible in standard gem cosmology. Gems only fuse with gems. The conditions for fusion are harmonic two beings of compatible resonance, finding a shared frequency that allows them to combine into a new form. Humans, in the homeworld framework, do not have the right kind of resonance. They do not have gems. They should not be fusible with anything. Steven and Connie fuse anyway, in the episode Alone Together, and they become Stevonnie, who is beautiful and confident and moves through the world with a grace that neither Steven nor Connie fully has alone. Stevonnie's first experience is going to a party and being noticed by everyone in the room. The show is extremely precise about what it means to be a new, unprecedented kind of person walking into a space full of people who have established categories and do not have a category for you. Stevonnie becomes a recurring presence in the show, appearing in moments of particular significance when Steven and Connie are most in sync, when the challenge they are facing requires more than either of them has alone, when the emotional resonance between them is high enough to sustain the fusion. They are a person, with their own voice and their own reactions, not merely an overlay of the two. The show handles their identity with consistency and care, including a sequence in Season 5 on Homeworld where Stevonnie is imprisoned and left alone, and the experience triggers a dream sequence episode that is one of the show's more overtly surreal and disturbing pieces of work. But all of this, the powers, the fusion, the shield, the tears, is not the most important thing about Steven. The most important thing about Steven is that he believes that love and genuine connection are solutions, practically speaking, not just philosophically. He does not hold this as an abstract principle. He acts on it consistently in situations where most people would use force, and it keeps working. He talks to the cluster and the cluster listens. He reaches Lapis in the mirror. He gets through to Peridot when she is a prisoner and the crystal gems are treating her as a threat, and he decides to treat her as a person. He talks to White Diamond, who has not been talked to, as an equal, with genuine expectation of a response in what appears to be a very long time, and he gets through. The show's argument, made through Steven's choices and their outcomes, is that the refusal to write anyone off, the stubborn insistence on treating the most hostile, the most powerful, the most apparently irredeemable entities as beings capable of change, is not naivete. It is strategy. It is a specific approach to a world that has been organized around domination and fear, and the approach works precisely because the world was organized that way. The Diamond Authority built a civilization on the principle that beings are what they are made to be and cannot choose differently. Steven keeps walking up to that principle and disproving it, case by case, gem by gem. But here is what Steven Universe Future adds to this picture, and why it is essential to the show's full understanding. It shows you what happens when the strategy works too well. When everyone has been saved, when the big fights are over, when the cosmic threat has been resolved and the healing has happened and the future is genuinely open, what happens to the person who is built to manage crisis? Steven in Future is not okay. He has been not okay for a long time, and the relief of the crisis being over has removed the structure that was holding him together, which it turns out was not health but urgency. For years, most of his life, Steven has been running from one emergency to the next, using each emergency as an excuse not to sit with the accumulated weight of what the emergencies have cost. He has been grieving his mother, and managing his guilt about his mother, and trying to be the thing his mother was supposed to be, all while also being 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, all while also losing friends to danger and watching his family nearly shatter and carrying the knowledge of what he is and where he came from. He has been carrying this with the same instinctive reach toward others that defines him: helping, healing, fixing, because helping is the thing he knows how to do, and the one context in which the weight feels purposeful. When the context is removed, when there is no one left to save, no fight to fight, when the world is healing and the gems are healing and everything is, in some measurable sense, going to be okay, the weight is still there, and now there is nothing to do with it. The pink power that starts manifesting in Future is the show's most explicit engagement with the concept of stored trauma. Steven cannot control it. It appears when his emotions spike, when someone he loves is hurt, when he feels cornered, when the old patterns of crisis are triggered by situations that are not actually crises but that feel like them, because his nervous system has been calibrated for crisis and cannot immediately recalibrate to peace. In those moments, his gem activates, and his skin goes pink, and his body grows, and he becomes, briefly, something that is not fully Steven, something older and larger and more dangerous. Something that has the shape of diamond power. The show is careful and correct to frame this as trauma, not corruption. Steven is not becoming evil. He is having a response to things that happen to him that is disproportionate to the present moment, because the present moment is connected, neurologically, to past moments that warranted a larger response. His therapist, a human woman named Dr. West, who does not know the specifics of what Steven is, but who recognizes grief and hypervigilance, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has been managing other people's crises for so long that they have no access to their own, helps him begin to articulate it. The articulation is the work. For most of Future, Steven cannot say what is actually wrong. He has so thoroughly trained himself to orient outward, to identify problems in other people and address them, to be the helper, the healer, the connector, that identifying his own need is genuinely difficult. It feels wrong to him. It feels like abandoning the people who need him. It feels like the kind of selfishness he was never able to indulge, because he was always one wrong move away from someone getting hurt, always carrying the gem that was once a diamond, always the person who the universe seemed to have nominated as the one whose feelings came last. The show, in Future, gently and then with increasing force, argues that this is not sustainable. It argues this through Steven's own body, which is refusing to cooperate with the performance of fine, The pink power keeps breaking through. His relationships become strained because he is reaching for them with a kind of desperation that is not entirely about the relationships themselves. It is about needing them to confirm that he is okay, that he is worth something, that the connections he is maintaining are evidence of a self-worth maintaining. That is not love, exactly. It is love tangled with need in a way that is understandable and human, and also a little frightening to watch in someone this young. The ending of future Stephen in a van, driving away from Beach City, Connie in the passenger seat, the crystal gems on the steps of the temple behind him, is one of the most carefully calibrated endings I have seen in animation. It is not triumphant, it is not sad, it is the feeling of something genuinely beginning after everything has ended. He is not healed. He says this essentially. He is not fixed, but he is ready to try. He is going to take the open road and the open future and find out who he is without the emergency structure, without the defined role, without the weight of being what everyone needs him to be. He is going to figure out who Stephen is when no one needs saving. That is an enormous thing to hand a teenage boy, and it is also the most honest possible ending for the story. The crystal gem in his stomach goes with him. Rose goes with him. The history goes with him. All of it goes with him. And it is heavy, and he is ready to carry it differently now, even if he doesn't know yet exactly how. He will be okay. You believe that at the end of Future, not because the show tells you so, but because it showed you what he was made of, and what he was made of is enough. Section 11. Bismuth. The question that wouldn't stay sealed. She has been in that bubble for thousands of years. She is warm when she comes out of it, warm immediately, the way some people are warm, with their whole body, in a way that does not require warming up. She laughs loudly. She picks up Stephen and holds him at arm's length to look at him, because he is small and round and carrying Rose's gem, and she needs to figure out what that means before she can decide how to feel about him. She decides quickly, with the instinctive generosity of someone who was made for a particular kind of love, a loving of things that fight, a loving of the cause, a loving that expresses itself through heat and work and the making of useful, beautiful, deadly things. Bismuth is a gem whose function is smithing, construction, the transformation of metal into form. Her arms can become tools. She can reshape metal at will, heat it and bend it and hammer it into weapons and structures with the particular joy of someone who has found the overlap between what they were made for and what they love to do. She made the weapons the crystal gems carried in the war. She made the forge inside a volcano. She was, by every account given by the crystal gems who knew her, an extraordinary presence, the kind of person who makes things more possible by being in the room. And she was sealed in a bubble by rose quartz and hidden in Lion's dimension for 5,000 years because she said something Rose did not want to hear. She made the breaking point. That is its name, and the name is accurate. It is a weapon designed to shatter any gem in a single strike. The mechanism involves a concentrated compression of force applied directly to a gemstone, bypassing the gem's ability to regenerate its physical form and hitting the stone itself. One strike from the breaking point and the gem shatters, permanently. Not poof, not destabilize, not retreat into the gem and come back in a few days. Gone. Bismuth's argument for this weapon made to Rose, in the forge, before the sealing, was the argument of someone who had looked at the reality of the war and followed the logic all the way to its end. The crystal gems could fight homeworld forces indefinitely. They could destabilize gem after gem and those gems would regenerate and come back. The war had been going on for centuries. It was not ending. And the reason it was not ending was that the side the crystal gems most needed to stop the diamonds, specifically, could not be stopped by conventional means. Diamonds were too powerful to be poofed. They had essentially unlimited resources and essentially unlimited patience. The crystal gems were fighting a war of attrition they were inevitably going to lose, and the weapon that might change the equation was this one. Rose said no. Rose drew a moral line. She would not shatter any gem. She would not destroy lives, even enemy lives. The crystal gems were fighting to protect life, and to shatter a gem was to destroy a life, and that was not what they were. That was Homeworld's logic, not theirs, Bismuth said. And when Homeworld shatters our gems, what are we? Still better than them? Still right? When our friends are gone permanently because we refuse to use the one tool that might have protected them? Rose did not answer this. Rose did not engage with it. She fought Bismuth, an actual physical fight, two powerful gems in a forge, which the show depicts with a ferocity that marks it as different from other combat in the series, and she won, and she sealed Bismuth in a bubble, and she stored the bubble in Lion's dimension, and she told everyone else that Bismuth had gone missing in battle. She lied to the Crystal Gems who had given everything to the rebellion. She lied to Garnet and Amethyst and every other Crystal Gem who had ever trusted her. She lied and she hid the evidence and she moved on, because the alternative was having a conversation she had decided not to have. The argument Bismuth made, the argument Rose sealed away rather than answer, is an argument that the show raises and does not resolve. Not because it is unresolvable as a matter of narrative tidiness, but because it is genuinely difficult in a way the show chooses to honor by not simplifying it into an answer. Let's sit with both sides. Rose's position. The Crystal Gems are fighting for something better. They are fighting for a world where gems can choose, where life is valued, where the logic of domination and destruction is replaced by something else. If they adopt the weapons of domination and destruction in order to win, they become what they are fighting against, and the world they create with their victory will have the shape of the violence that made it. The means are not separable from the ends. Winning ugly produces an ugly peace. Bismuth's position. The Crystal Gems are fighting a real war against real enemies who will shatter them without hesitation and who have essentially unlimited power. The refusal to use every available tool is not a moral high ground. It is a luxury paid for in other people's suffering. The gems who are corrupted, who are shattered by homeworld forces, who die in a war that could have been shortened, they pay the price of Rose's moral purity. And when the leader of the rebellion is also a diamond, is also the person who started the colony they are fighting to stop, the moral purity starts to look rather different. It starts to look like someone protecting the pieces of the system she came from, even while claiming to fight against it. The show ends without vindicating Bismuth. The breaking point is gone. Steven threw it into lava rather than use it. The war ended, eventually, not through shattering anyone, but through a process of confrontation and revelation, and, ultimately, White Diamond choosing to change. In that sense, Rose's philosophy won. Talking to the diamonds worked. The war ended without the Crystal Gems having to become shatterers. But thousands of Crystal Gems were corrupted. Thousands of Rose Quartz Gems were bubbled and stored across the galaxy. The war lasted thousands of years and cost immeasurably. And the fact that it ended peacefully does not retroactively validate the cost of the path that got there, any more than surviving a preventable accident validates the choices that made it preventable. Bismuth comes back at the end, and she is part of the Crystal Gems family again. Pearl hugs her. There is warmth, there is genuine gladness, and nobody says, "About that thing," about whether you were right. Nobody sits down and holds the argument the show raised and follows it to a conclusion. It is just there, in the room, between them, unaddressed, because the show has moved into its resolution, and the resolution is about love and reconciliation and the possibility of change, and Bismuth's question is about justice and cost and what you owe the dead. Those are not incompatible projects, but the show chose one and left the other present but quiet, which is the honest thing to do with an argument you cannot solve and the frustrating thing to do with an argument that needed an answer. Bismuth gets her forge back at the end of the show. She is making things again. She is building the equipment that Steven and the Crystal Gems will use for whatever comes next. Her hands are still tools, still capable of making weapons capable of ending a diamond if she chose to. She is choosing instead to make things that protect rather than destroy. It is a choice she makes with full knowledge of the alternative, which is the only way a moral choice means anything. She is still asking the question. She will always be asking the question. The show was wise enough to make her the character who carries it, because Bismuth, out of everyone in the Crystal Gems, has the clearest and most unromantic view of what the rebellion actually was and what it actually cost. She was there. She made the swords. She knew. She is the show's conscience in the places the show itself is not quite willing to go, and that function does not require resolution. It requires presence. It requires that she remain in the room with her question, asking it, so that the audience cannot entirely forget it is being asked. Section 12. The dark details you missed the first time. There is a specific pleasure distinct from the pleasure of first watching, in returning to a show you know well and finding things you missed. Not plot details, not hidden clues, but the small, quiet moments that reveal something about the world, or the characters that the show never called your attention to directly. Steven Universe is exceptionally good at these. Rebecca Sugar and her team built the show with a patience for subtlety that rewards the kind of attention you can only give something on a third or fourth pass. Let's go through some of them. Not in any particular narrative order, just as they come a collection of the moments that are darker or stranger or more specific than they first appear. The kindergarten's lasting damage is one of the first and most persistent. When Steven visits the prime kindergarten, the one in the desert, Amethyst's origin point, the camera moves over the landscape around it, and the land is dead. Not desert dead, not the normal aridity of a dry climate, but something bleached and scoured that registers immediately as wrong. The ground has the texture of something that was drained rather than dried. No plants, no insects, no birds. Thousands of years of sunlight and rain, and none of it has been enough to begin recovery. The colonization happened so long ago that human civilization was in its infancy, and the land has not healed since. It will not heal. The show tells you this quietly, through the visual language, without a character saying it in dialogue. The first time you watch, you register it as weird alien thing and move on. The third time, you understand that you are looking at what an industrial extraction operation does to a living system, and the weight of it is different. The bubble gems in the basement of the Crystal Temple sit in stasis for the entire first season and a half of the show without being addressed. They are just there, in the background of shots that pass through that room, dozens of pink bubbles, each containing a corrupted gem. Rose put them there. The show does not comment on this. The first time you watch, you may not even notice them. They are not the focus of any scene. They are just present. The second time, you know what they are, and you see them in every shot. And the fact of them, the hundreds of corrupted gems in long-term stasis that no one is actively trying to help, that have been there for centuries, that are there while the crystal gems have conversations and eat pizza and watch television, is not comfortable. Lion's diet is never addressed. Lion is a large, magical, possibly immortal pink lion who eats things. He eats the things that appear in front of him. At one point, he swallows a piece of a mission objective. He appears to get something out of eating, or at least to engage in it voluntarily, which raises a question the show does not ask. What does a magical, revived immortal lion eat? The ocean is right there. The beach has seagulls. There are probably fish. The show does not go here, and it probably should not. This is a children's show, not a nature documentary, but on a quiet rewatch. Every time you see lion, you may find yourself wondering whether the beach at Beach City has a strange absence of seagulls that nobody has connected to the large supernatural cat in residence. The kindergarten's hole placement is not random. The chambers in the kindergarten, where individual gems grew, are carved at regular intervals along the rock faces. They are the size and shape of the gems they produced. Amethyst's chamber is at the bottom, smaller than the others, slightly off to the side. The show does not comment on this positioning, but when you know what Amethyst is dealing with, the sense of having emerged wrong, been placed wrong, occupied a position in the kindergarten that was already marginal. The physical placement of her hole in the rock is a quiet piece of world building that maps perfectly onto her interior experience. She came out at the bottom. She was always at the bottom of the structure. This was not accidental. Greg's history is sketched with more care than the show always calls attention to. He came from a family that expected him to be something specific. There is an uncle who appears briefly and who represents the life Greg walked away from, the expectations he left behind. He drove away in a van in his late teens and made his own life out of music and wandering and then, eventually, Beach City. He was very young when he met Rose. He was very young when he had Steven, and then Rose was gone. And he was a young man living at a car wash, raising a child whose nature he did not entirely understand, connected to a community of ancient aliens through the child they shared, not fully part of their world and not exactly part of the human world either. The show treats Greg with consistent warmth, and I think it treats him fairly. But the cost of his choices, the loneliness of his position, the years of sleeping in a van, the complete disruption of whatever life he might otherwise have had is present in the background of his story in a way that is easy to miss when the show is presenting him primarily as comic relief and emotional support. Connie's relationship with her own achievement is something the show handles with subtlety that rewards attention. She is exceptional, academically exceptional, disciplined, goal-directed in a way that is partly genuine drive and partly the product of parents who had very specific expectations. The Maheshwaran family dynamic gets addressed in the episode Nightmare Hospital, which is one of the show's best standalone character studies. Dr. Maheswaran is formidable and loving and genuinely terrifying to her daughter in the way of a parent who has high standards and expresses love through those standards rather than through warmth. Connie has trained herself, through years of meeting those standards, to be self-sufficient to a degree that occasionally looks like she does not need anyone, which is not quite true, but which she has learned to perform because needing people was not part of the approved emotional vocabulary of her household. Her friendship with Stephen, then, is not just a friendship. It is the first relationship in her life where being imperfect is acceptable, where needing help is allowed, where she can put down the performance of competence and be exactly as uncertain and scared as she actually is. The depth of that friendship makes sense when you understand what it was the first version of for her, and the fact that it eventually deepens into something romantic, and that the show handles that transition with genuine maturity, is one of the quieter achievements of Future. The way the diamonds speak about gems below them is a constant, subtle horror on rewatch. Yellow diamond refers to groups of gems by their type rather than any individual identity. The sapphires, the rubies, in the way you refer to fungible units rather than people. She has had thousands of gems under her authority and she does not know most of their names, which is not unusual for a ruler, but the show makes sure you notice it. Blue Diamond, who is supposed to be the more empathetic of the two, maintains a human zoo. She has collected humans and kept them in a controlled environment and gives them names when they arrive, which might seem caring until you realize that giving someone a new name is one of the first acts of erasure. It is the removal of their existing identity and the replacement of it with one you have chosen for them. The zoo humans have been renamed so many times for so many generations that they no longer know what names their ancestors had before they were taken. Homeworld technology, when it appears in the show, is always described in terms of efficiency and function. Every gem structure, the communication hubs, the kindergartens, the galaxy warp, was built to do a job. The aesthetic of Homeworld is angular and precise, colors determined by which diamond's authority the structure falls under. There is no ornamentation in Homeworld architecture that does not serve a function. There is no art that is not propaganda. The diamond murals that appear throughout the show, enormous, stylized representations of the four diamonds, are the only visual imagery in Homeworld's aesthetic, and they are explicitly propaganda, the only images the civilization has decided matter. This is the horror of it. A civilization so thoroughly organized around function that it has no aesthetic tradition except the glorification of power, no art for its own sake, no music that isn't ordered, no color that isn't assigned. The crystal gems, who have been on Earth for thousands of years, have absorbed the Earth's aesthetics and made them their own pearl draws. Amethyst eats food for pleasure. Garnet wears boots she chose because she likes how they look. These small individualities are the visible evidence of what the Earth gave them. And they are, by Homeworld standards, contamination. The episode Stephen's Birthday is ostensibly a light, sweet episode about Stephen having a birthday party and discovering that he is aging more slowly than a human child should. He is, by the end of the episode, somewhere between his physical development as a child and what he should be by his actual chronological age. The show plays this for some comedy and some warmth, and then it moves on. But the implication that Stephen may not age on a human timeline, that he may outlive Greg, that he may outlive Connie, that the gem in his stomach may eventually slow his aging to a diamond's pace is left hanging in the air without resolution. Future addresses some of this indirectly, through Stephen's awareness that his future is genuinely uncertain, that he does not know what he is or what he is becoming. But the specific question of aging, of who he will outlive and how he will carry that, is not answered. It is one of the heaviest things the show drops and does not pick back up. The Mirror, in Mirror Gem, has been studying Beach City. Lapis, trapped in the mirror for thousands of years on Earth, can show Stephen images of Beach City images that imply she has been watching the town, watching the people in it, watching the crystal gems, for an indefinite period. She has seen more of Stephen's life than he knows. She has watched the world she was imprisoned in for longer than he has been alive. When she is freed and flies away, she takes with her knowledge of Beach City of the crystal gems, of Steven knowledge she gathered involuntarily, through a prison that also functioned as a window. On a first watch, this is just setup for her character. On a second watch, the specific loneliness of that position, able to see but not participate, witness to a world you are excluded from, accumulating knowledge of a life you cannot live is almost unbearable. Rose's healing tears require genuine emotion. Steven cannot use this power on command. He has to actually cry, from real grief or real love or something that touches the actual bottom of him. This is a design feature, not a limitation. It means the power is genuinely connected to feeling that the healing requires vulnerability, not technique. It is the opposite of a weapon, which is something you use from a position of control. The healing tears require you to be at the mercy of something. They are proof of something felt, not something performed. The implication, which the show does not dwell on but which is present if you follow the logic, is that Rose's healing tears also required genuine emotion from her. When she revived, Lion held him and cried over him, and whatever she felt in that moment was what activated the power. She was not performing grief. She was not strategically deploying a useful ability. She was genuinely devastated by the loss of a creature she had cared about, and the devastation was what made the miracle happen. Whatever Rose felt for Lion, it was real enough to bring him back from death. That is not a small thing. And the chest in Lion's dimension, which was visible in the background of multiple episodes throughout the series, and which was still there, open, in the film we never know what was in it. Every other object in the dimension was eventually explained. The chest was not. It was open in the film, which means Steven opened it and looked inside, and the show decided we did not need to see. Whatever she kept in there was hers to have. Whatever he found was his to know. The gap between what the show showed and what remained private is, in the end, one of the most honest editorial decisions in the series. Some things are not meant for an audience. Some things belong to the people who lived them. Pearl's room in the Crystal Temple is almost completely empty. Each gem's room in the temple is a reflection of their interior world. Amethyst is a pile of everything, warm and chaotic. Garnets is a geometric space of precise, elegant angles. Roses is a fountain and soft grass and sunlight. Pearl's room is almost nothing, just a vast white space with a few isolated objects arranged at great distances from each other, as if she has not quite known what to put there. As if the space of a self, left to her own devices, is mostly emptiness that she hasn't yet figured out how to fill. On a first watch, you might read this as Pearl's fastidiousness. She keeps her space minimal and controlled, which fits her personality. On a second watch, knowing what you know about Pearl's history, it reads differently. It reads as a room belonging to someone who was never supposed to have a self, who was manufactured without one, who has been building one from scratch for thousands of years and does not fully know yet what goes in the space a self occupies, who has some objects, a few beautiful things, arranged with care but mostly space, mostly the white room, mostly still figuring out what belongs there. Steven Universe is a show that trusts its audience to find these things. It does not call your attention to them. It does not underline them. It puts them in the frame and moves on, and every time you go back, you find something new, and what you find changes based on where you are in your own life, and what you know now that you didn't know before. That is not an accident. It is the design. It is the show's way of remaining open, of being genuinely a story that grows with the people who watch it. That means something different at 15 and at 25 and at 40, that holds something new every time you hold it up to the light. Section 13. The music as a second layer of everything. There is a version of this video that does not talk about the music. It covers the lore and the world building and the dark details and the character histories, and then it stops, having given you essentially what the episode guide and the wiki and the fan analysis would give you, well organized. That version would be thorough. It would miss the most important thing. Because in Steven Universe, the music is not decoration. The music is not what plays in the background while the story happens. The music is the story, told again in a different language, and the things the music says are sometimes the things the story cannot say directly, the things that live below the level of plot in the region where feeling lives, the region that analysis can point toward but cannot fully enter. Rebecca Sugar came to Steven Universe from Adventure Time, where she had been a writer and storyboard artist, and where she had already demonstrated an ability to write songs that did more than songs are usually asked to do. The song she contributed to Adventure Time, called I Remember You, a duet between Ice King and Marceline, that functions as a piece of tragic backstory delivered entirely through music, was already evidence of an artist who understood that the grammar of music allows you to say things that prose and dialogue have no syntax for. Feelings held simultaneously. Things that are true and contradictory. The way grief and love are not opposites but the same thing in different conditions. Steven Universe gave her a whole show to work in, and she built the music into its structure from the beginning. Consider the song Do It For Her, which Pearl sings to Connie while training her to fight. On the surface, it is a training montage song, inspirational, energetic, about working hard and pushing through difficulty. The melody is warm and bright, but listen to the words. Pearl is telling Connie that the goal of training is to protect Steven, to be ready to fight for Steven, to put Steven's safety above everything else, including yourself. She is telling a 12-year-old girl that her value as a fighter is determined by her usefulness to someone she loves, and that becoming a better warrior is an act of devotion to that person. She is, essentially, passing down her own psychology, the psychology of someone who defined herself entirely through service and devotion to someone else, and presenting it as mentorship. The first time you hear it, it sounds like a training song. The second time, knowing what you know about Pearl, it sounds like something being transmitted that perhaps should not be transmitted. The show is not endorsing Pearl's psychology here. It is showing it to you in the most direct and unsettling way possible, through the vehicle of Pearl passing it on. The song is both genuinely rousing and quietly troubling, and it holds both of those things in a way that dialogue could not. It's over, isn't it, has already been mentioned, but it is worth more time. Pearl sings it in Season 3, standing on a cliff with the wind in her hair, watching a ship leave. She is processing the end of something, the end of the period in which she could tell herself that Rose's relationship with Greg was temporary, that Rose would come back to her, that whatever she and Rose were to each other was the primary relationship and Greg was a detour. Rose is having a child. The detour is the destination. Pearl is being left behind in a way she cannot argue with. The song does several things simultaneously. It is a piece of grief for Rose specific, personal. The grief of someone who loved completely and was not loved in exactly the same way. It is also, less obviously, a piece of Pearl finding out that she had been telling herself a story about her relationship with Rose that Rose was not telling. It is the moment you realize that the thing you thought was mutual was, in fact, asymmetric, that the person you organized your world around had a world that you were not the center of. Every line of the song lands harder on a second watch because you know more about Pearl. You know about the compelled silence, the thousands of years of service, the definition of self through devotion. You know that Pearl had nothing to fall back on when this happened. You know that the question the song asks, "What am I now in this world without her?" is not rhetorical. She does not know. The world she built was built around Rose, and Rose is choosing something else, and Pearl is standing on a cliff with the wind in her hair and genuinely not knowing who she is when she is not in relation to someone else. The answer she finds, the answer the series arc gives her, slowly and imperfectly over many seasons, is that she is Pearl. That there are things she is and things she loves and things she does that are her own, regardless of who she is in relation to. But the song gives you the moment before she knows that. It gives you the freefall. Here Comes a Thought is sung by Garnet and Steven and Connie, and it is about anxiety, ostensibly about the way a small worry enters and becomes a spiral, grows until it takes over everything, tells you it is the only true thing. The show presents it as a meditation tool, a song about how to interrupt the spiral before it consumes you. The animation during the song is extraordinary. Golden threads of thought moving through minds, tangling and then releasing, two people singing to each other about the experience of being afraid of their own minds. What the song is also doing, which you understand better after the full run of the series, it is about Sapphire. Garnet is, in part, Sapphire, and Sapphire has future vision. Sapphire can see probability trees extending into the future, and the temptation that comes with that, the specific anxiety of someone who can see what might happen, is the temptation to believe that seeing it makes it inevitable. to treat the future as fixed, to spiral into every possibility until you are paralyzed. The song is Garnet Sapphire, speaking through Garnet, acknowledging that her gift and her anxiety are the same thing in different registers. Seeing ahead is wonderful, and it is also a capacity for worry without end, because the future is always there, always extending, always containing every possible disaster you could imagine. The song is about breathing, about staying in the present, about letting the thought arrive and not letting it win. It is a gorgeous, functional, genuinely useful piece of music. It is also one of the most precise pieces of characterization for Sapphire the show ever produces, tucked into a song that is nominally about something more universal. Escapism is the loneliest song in the show. Steven sings it while projecting his consciousness into a watermelon. Steven, a plant-based duplicate of himself that lives in a distant ocean, trying to reach his friends. He is very far from home. He is doing something no one else can do, in a form that is not his form, in an ocean that is not his ocean. The song is about wanting to be somewhere else, about the appeal of escaping into a different shape, a different life, a different problem, about the seductiveness of not being yourself for a while. On first viewing, it functions as a plot song. Here is Steven's situation. Here is his emotional state. Here is what he is going to do. On second viewing, it sits next to everything you know about Steven in future, and what it says becomes more resonant. Steven will spend the follow-up series in exactly this state, the desire to be something other than what he is, to project into a different form, to escape the weight of the gem in his stomach and the history it carries. Escapism is not just about a plot moment. It is a window into something that has been present in Steven's experience for a long time and which future will bring to the surface. Change Your Mind is the thesis. It is the song that ends Season 5, and it is addressed directly to White Diamond, and through White Diamond to everyone the show has been thinking about. Anyone who has been told they are only what they were made to be. Anyone who has been handed a role and told that the role is the entirety of them. Anyone who has ever been told by someone with more power than them that their real self is the self that submits and conforms and becomes smaller to fit the available space. I don't need you to respect me, Steven sings. I respect me. This is the show's clearest statement of its values, spoken by a child to a cosmic god, in a confrontation that should be completely one-sided and is not. Because the show has spent 5 seasons establishing that love, real, stubborn, specific love, is not smaller than power, that the willingness to stand in front of something enormous and say you are wrong, and I know you can change, and I am going to keep saying it until you do, that this is not weakness. That it is the most powerful thing in the world. That it has always been the thing that changes what power could not. White Diamond changes. She laughs that ugly, undignified, surprised laugh, and something comes back into her that had been gone for a very long time. The moment is played with a restraint that makes it more moving, not less. It is not triumphant. It is almost quiet. A very old, very powerful, very lonely being remembering what it felt like to be imperfect, to be surprised, to be reached. The music makes it. Dee Dee Magno-Hall, who voices Pearl, carries much of the vocal weight of the series. Estelle, who voices Garnet, gives Stronger Than You, one of the most commanding vocal performances in animation. Zach Callison, who voices Steven, grows across the series in a way that is partly acting and partly the physical reality of a voice actor whose voice was actually changing during the run of the show. His voice dropped in real time, and the show incorporated that, which is one of the most unusual decisions in animation history and also one of the most right ones. But it is the instrumental score, composed by Ivy and Surashu, that gives the show its particular atmospheric texture. The music of Steven Universe sounds like a specific kind of emotional weather, mild and slightly melancholy, occasionally breaking into something bright, with a harmonic language that tends toward the unresolved. The show's leitmotifs, recurring musical themes for specific characters and situations, are woven through scenes so quietly that you absorb them before you consciously identify them. You will hear the Crystal Gems theme and feel a specific thing before you know you are hearing it. This is what music does that analysis cannot. It enters through a different door. You can describe the lore of the Diamond Authority in full, accurate detail, and someone will understand it intellectually. Play them, "What's the Use of Feeling Blue?" and they will feel Yellow Diamond's grief as a physical thing, and no description could have produced that. The music is the show's second body. The plot and the lore are one body, and the music is another, and they share a space, and the show that lives in the overlap between them is the show that stays with you. Section 14. Spinel 6,000 Years of Standing Still. There is a garden somewhere in the universe. It was designed to be beautiful. Pink flowers, sculpted hedges, paths that wind through careful arrangements of color and scent and geometry. It was Pink Diamond's garden, made for her during the era when she was still living on Homeworld, before she was given a colony, before she became Rose Quartz, before everything that happened after. She played there. She was young, in the diamond scale of young, and she was being managed by an authority that wanted her occupied, and the garden was part of that management. They gave her someone to play with. Spinel was made specifically for Pink Diamond, not for combat, not for labor, not for the intellectual or administrative functions that other high gem types served. Spinel was made for companionship. Her gem is designed for it physically, functionally, built into the nature of what she is. She was created to be present, to be entertaining, to be devoted. She was created to be Pink Diamond's friend, in the specific sense of a friendship that was not chosen by both parties but assigned to one of them and offered to the other. And she was good at it. She loved Pink Diamond fully, immediately, with the completeness of something designed to love. She made herself ridiculous to make Pink Diamond laugh. She played whatever game Pink Diamond wanted to play. She was there, always there, in the garden, present and warm and willing. And Pink Diamond loved her back, in the way Pink Diamond loved things, with immediate enthusiasm and genuine warmth, and the specific carelessness of someone who had always had things available when they wanted them. Then Pink Diamond was given Earth. She left the garden. She told Spinel it was a game. Wait here, right in this spot, don't move, I'll be right back. And she flew away, and the game began, and Spinel waited. She waited as the game stopped being fun and started being confusing. She waited as the confusion became loneliness. She waited through the loneliness until she couldn't feel it anymore, until the waiting had gone on so long that the feeling of waiting became the entire texture of her existence, and everything underneath it was compressed beyond access. She waited until, to protect herself from the crushing accumulative weight of the wait, she stopped moving entirely. She locked herself in the position Pink Diamond had left her in, and she stayed there, perfectly still, for 6,000 years. The garden changed around her. The carefully sculpted hedges grew wild. The paths became overgrown. The flowers that Pink Diamond had planted forget-me-nots, specifically and precisely forget-me-nots. Those small blue flowers, named in every human language for the act of not being forgotten, grew and spread and surrounded the still figure at the center, a monument to an absence, a garden gone to seed around a person who would not let herself go to seed the same way. 6,000 years. Human civilization had its entire recorded history in that time, and a significant portion before it. Empires rose and fell. Languages were born and became the root of other languages and were forgotten. The Earth went through several significant climatic shifts. Pink Diamond had the rebellion and the war and the faked death and the entire career as Rose Quartz, and then became Steven, who grew up and had adventures and saved the world and went to therapy. All of that happened while Spinel stood in one spot. Steven broadcasts his message, the one he sends to the whole galaxy at the end of the main series, announcing that Pink Diamond is gone, that she became him, that things are changing. And Spinel in the garden receives it. After 6,000 years, she gets movement back. She understands that the game is over. She understands, in the most devastating possible way, that there was no game. That Pink Diamond left and never came back, not because of some extraordinary circumstance, but because she forgot, or because she chose not to remember, or because she was moving into a new life and Spinel was the old one and she never quite got around to going back. Spinel arrives on Earth with a world-ending biological weapon and a broken heart and a fighting style that looks like something from a 1930s rubber hose cartoon, all exaggerated stretch and snap, limbs extending to impossible lengths, movements that would be slapstick comedy in another context. The show does something extraordinary with this. It presents her as simultaneously dangerous and heartbreaking, funny in the way of someone whose coping mechanism is performance, terrifying in the way of someone with a genuine grievance, and a weapon capable of ending the world. She is not a villain the way homeworld villains are villains. She is a character with a completely justified wound who has chosen a catastrophic response to it. The film, Steven Universe, the movie, released in 2019, handles her with care that respects the weight of what she is carrying. It does not ask her to forgive easily. It does not paper over the specificity of the harm with generic redemption. Spinal's healing, if healing is the word, comes in two parts. First, the relationship with Steven, who treats her as a person with a legitimate grievance rather than a threat to be neutralized. And second, the unexpected gift of the remaining diamonds. Yellow, blue, and white barely knew Spinel when she was with Pink Diamond. She was Pink's companion, present in the garden, not part of their court. When they meet her now, this shattered, grieving, dangerous being who was left behind by their youngest, they are immediately, genuinely enchanted by her. Yellow laughs at something Spinel does. Blue reaches for her. White inclines herself toward her in a way that is as close to wanting as White Diamond is currently capable of. They want to spend time with her. They offer her a home with them. Spinel chooses to go. She chooses them. And the film presents this as a good ending, as warmth, as the kind of found family that is genuinely healing. But, and the film knows you are thinking this, it is also a repetition of the pattern. Spinel's function was to be Pink Diamond's companion. She is going to be the three remaining Diamonds' companion. The beings she is attaching herself to are beings who have historically caused enormous harm and who are now, genuinely, trying to do better. The circumstances are different. The choice is genuinely her own, not compelled by her design in the same way it was with Pink Diamond. She is choosing this with full knowledge of what happened the last time. But the structure of the situation rhymes with the original wound in a way the film acknowledges by showing it to you without commenting on it. Spinel is going from 1 diamond to 3. She is leaving behind the world that hurt her and going toward a world that seems to want her. Whether that world will continue to want her in 600 years is not something anyone can guarantee. The forget-me-nots in the garden are the detail that will not leave you. The show places them there, gives them screen time, makes sure you see them, and says nothing about them. They may have grown naturally over 6,000 years, filling in the space of an abandoned garden with whatever seeds arrived on the wind. Or Pink Diamond may have planted them before she left, knowing on some level that leaving was what she was doing, knowing in the part of herself she was not showing the court that the garden was being abandoned and not just temporarily vacated, planting flowers named for the imperative of not forgetting in a garden she was about to forget. If she planted them deliberately, it is one of the most specifically cruel acts in the entire series. Not the cruelty of malice, but the cruelty of guilt, a private acknowledgement that she knew, that she felt the wrong of it, that she could not bring herself to go back, and could not bring herself to pretend she did not know. The flowers were the acknowledgement made private, the thing she said to herself that she could not say to Spinel, could not say to anyone, could not make herself act on. That is the version of Pink Diamond that is hardest to hold. Not the one who forgot that version is sad but survivable, the story of someone young and careless and swept away by an extraordinary life. The version who knew and planted flowers named "Don't Forget Me" in a garden she was never going to come back to that version is something harder. That version is the one who understood what she was doing while she was doing it and chose the easier path anyway. You can love someone and do that. That is not a comfortable thing to know. The show knows you will notice the forget-me-nots and it says nothing about them and it trusts you to sit with what they might mean. Section 15. What the ending doesn't fix. The finale of Steven Universe is called Change Your Mind. The final episode of Steven Universe Future is called The Future. Between them, they deliver something genuinely rare in long-running serialized fiction, an ending that feels earned. Not just satisfying in the sense of resolving tension, but earned in the sense that the resolution comes from the same values the show has been building toward for years. The ending is not a surprise. It is a confirmation. It is the show arriving at the place it was always traveling toward and being there and making it feel true. White Diamond changes. The corrupted gems are healed. The Diamond Authority disbands from the form it had taken, the rigid, hierarchical, fear-driven structure, and becomes something looser and stranger, 3 ancient rulers trying to learn a different way. Steven leaves Beach City with Connie and the road in front of him. The crystal gems are on the steps of the temple, watching him go. Everyone is alive. Everyone has somewhere to go. The world is not fixed, but it is pointed in a better direction. And then there are all the things the ending does not fix. The ending does not fix the 67 known corrupted gems who were healed in the finale and are now, somewhere on Earth, trying to understand what 5,000 years as a monster means for their sense of self. They have their minds back. They have their forms back. They do not have 5,000 years back. Every relationship they had, every person they knew, every gem who was part of their life before the corruption, all of it is 5,000 years distant. Some of those gems died. Some of them were also corrupted and are only now, also, recovering. Some of them were never on Earth and are somewhere in the galaxy, equally confused. What do the healed gems do? The show gives us the moment of healing, the beautiful light, the transformation, the beach at sunrise, the expressions of people becoming themselves again, and does not follow anyone through the day after. The healing is real. The day after is not shown. The day after is full of questions no one in the show is positioned to answer. What is my life now? What exists of what I knew? Where do I belong? How do I process 5,000 years of a form I did not choose? These are not small questions. They are not questions that healing resolves. They are the work that begins after healing. The show ends before the work begins. The cluster, as noted, is still in the Earth's mantle. The healing in the finale appeared to reach every corrupted gem on the surface. Whether it reached down through miles of rock and ocean floor and mantle to the forced fused mass of millions of shards is not confirmed. The cluster had found a kind of equilibrium in its voluntary bubble, not healed, not restored, but at peace in the way of something that has accepted its condition. Whether the healing light changed that condition, whether individual shards became individual gems again, or whether the fusion remained, is not addressed. The cluster is still down there. It is probably fine. But probably fine and resolved are not the same thing, and the show is honest enough in its structure to leave the cluster in the unresolved place. The zoo on the homeworld moon. Blue Diamond built it as a grief monument, a preserved slice of the Earth she had visited before Pink Diamond's apparent death, populated with the descendants of humans taken from Earth 6,000 years ago. Those humans have been there for 6,000 years, for over 200 generations, in a carefully managed environment that provides everything they need except knowledge of where they are and what they are not allowed to do. They have been given names when they arrive, their original names taken, new ones assigned. They have developed their own culture and language in the isolation of the zoo, a culture that has evolved completely separately from Earth's human culture over 6,000 years. Some of them, at the end of Season 4, are given the choice to leave. Some choose to leave. Some presumably don't. The ones who chose to leave, where do they go? Earth? Earth is where their ancestors came from, but it is not a place they have ever been. The culture of the zoo is not the culture of Earth. They would be, functionally, immigrants on a planet that is their ancestral home, but is not the home they grew up in. The show does not follow this. It does not show the humans from the zoo arriving on Earth, or the process of that transition, or what beach city or anywhere else makes of suddenly receiving a group of people from a 6,000-year-old lunar captivity. The question of Jasper is one of the most interesting unresolved things in the show. She is healed in the finale. She is there, on the beach, standing beside Amethyst. She is present. And then the show ends, and we never find out what Jasper does with the information that she spent her entire existence following the orders of a diamond who was actually the rebel she had been fighting against. The entire framework of her life, her devotion to Pink Diamond, her contempt for the crystal gems, her identity as the definitive homeworld soldier was built on a foundation of deception she was never consulted about. Jasper has no community now. Her homeworld is changing. The crystal gems are there, but they are not her people, or not in the way she would need them to be. Amethyst is technically her sister, both of them quartz gems grown from the earth, but Jasper would probably not accept that framing easily. She is not a character who invites community with ease. She is not a character who forgives. What does someone who has only ever known domination as a framework for existence do in a world that is trying to stop dominating things? What does it mean to be built for a purpose, to be designed for combat, for conquest, for the specific physical and psychological expression of Homeworld's power, and have the context for that purpose dissolve? The show does not ask this about Jasper. It gives her the healing and then the frame and lets us carry the question ourselves. Peridot's arc ends warmly, but briefly she has gone from homeworld technician to crystal gem, from someone who believed entirely in homeworld's hierarchy to someone who plants seeds in the ground and gets excited about meep morps, which is her word for art. Her transformation is one of the show's most complete and most comedically rendered, and it is also one of the most sincere. Peridot's discovery of Earth, of the organic life there, of human media and music, and the particular joy of something existing purely because it is beautiful, rather than because it serves a function, is presented with genuine wonder. She is not pretending to find things interesting. She actually finds them interesting. It is a conversion story done with complete commitment. But there is a question the show raises in Peridot's arc and does not fully pursue. What does it mean to grow? Gems do not grow. They do not change over time in the way that organic life changes. They were made the way they are, and they stay that way unless something external forces a change. Peridot is changing. We see her change, across seasons, in real time. But gems are not supposed to do that. The show presents her growth as wonderful, without fully engaging with what it means cosmologically, whether what is happening to Peridot is unique to her, or whether it represents a possibility that has always existed in gems that the homeworld system was designed to suppress. The crystal gems changed. They changed because Rose told them they could, and because they chose to, and because the environment of Earth, with its organic life and its human contact and its insistence on impermanence and growth, did something to them over thousands of years that homeworld would have considered contamination. What if that is simply what happens to gems when they are removed from the system that manufactures and constrains them? What if the capacity for growth was always there, and the caste system was the thing suppressing it? What if every gem, given the conditions the crystal gems had on Earth, could have become what Peridot became? The show does not ask this. It is too large a question for the space available, and asking it would require the show to make statements about the broader gem population that it is not positioned to make. But the question is there, implicit, in the gap between what Peridot becomes and what the gem civilization was designed to allow. Lars is back in Beach City, running the Big Donut, changed in ways he is still processing. He is pink. His hair is still a portal to Lion's dimension. He does not age at a human rate, or if he does, it is much more slowly than before. He is back in the small town where he grew up, having had experiences in space, leading the off-colors, being responsible for other people in a genuine way for the first time that no one in Beach City can fully understand. He found leadership out there. He found a version of himself that was braver and more generous and more capable than the Lars who worked the donut counter and was mean to people out of insecurity. He found that Lars in space, under pressure, when he had no choice. Now there is a choice. He is home, and the version of himself that he found is still there, but the context that produced it is gone. The question of whether you can maintain what you discovered about yourself under extraordinary circumstances when the circumstances return to ordinary, this is one of the oldest human questions, told through the very specific lens of a teenage boy with pink skin and a magic portal in his hair, selling donuts by the beach. The show ends without answering it. Lars is back. The Lars who came back is not who left. What he does with that is his. The off-colors Fluorite, Rhodonite, Padparadscha, and the Rutile twins landed somewhere. They are on Earth, presumably, or near it. They made it back. They are no longer hiding in tunnels on Homeworld, no longer categorized as defective and disposable. The world is changing, and the specific category of wrong-type fusion or off-size emergence that defined them as undesirable may be loosening or may be gone. But the world does not change evenly, and the people who built their identities around being hidden, around the constant low-level vigilance of those who know they are not supposed to exist, do not immediately stop living in that mode just because the authority that threatened them has declared an intention to change. Fluorite, who is a slow-moving fusion of 6 gems and speaks in long, thoughtful sentences, and loves the others with a maternal, steady warmth, wanted to stay fused. Homeworld had rules against that. Those rules are being questioned now. Whether the rules are gone, whether the new homeworld is actually safe for a 6-gem fusion who chose each other, whether the changes go all the way down to the structural level or remain at the level of declaration, these are questions that will play out over decades, not months. Fluorite and the off-colors are, like everyone else in the show's aftermath, in the middle of a transition whose completion is not yet visible. The show is honest about this. Not explicitly, it does not have a character say. The work of transformation is long, and the ending you have witnessed is a beginning, not a conclusion. But the way it ends with Stephen leaving, with the crystal gems on the steps, with all these threads still hanging open in the morning air, is the honest representation of what endings actually are. Not the completion of everything. The moment when a particular chapter becomes possible to leave. The moment when you have done what you can do in this place and the next thing has to happen somewhere you have not been yet. Some things will get better. History suggests that sustained effort toward change, applied by enough people over enough time, produces real structural shifts. The Diamond Authority was built on principles that were already being challenged from within by the crystal gems for thousands of years. It took enormous cost and an extraordinary sequence of events to crack it open enough for change to enter. But the crack is there now. Things will come through it. The gem civilization will be different in 1,000 years, in ways that are hard to predict from where we are standing. The corruption victims will find lives. The off-colors will find safety, probably, eventually. The zoo humans will find homes, probably, eventually. Lars will find what he is going to do with his very long, strange life, probably, eventually. These are not guarantees. The show does not deal in guarantees. It deals in possibilities, in directions, in the specific and hard-won opening of futures that seemed closed. It believes in those openings. It has earned the right to believe in them, having paid the cost of them in full over 5 seasons and a film and a follow-up series. But it does not pretend the opening is the same as the arrival. It does not pretend that the morning after the healing is the same as the healing. It shows you the dawn and trusts you to imagine the day. Section 16. Beach City, the human world at the edge of everything. Beach City is a small town. That is the first and most consistent thing about it. It has a population that seems to be in the hundreds, large enough for everyone to know most of the regulars, small enough that the arrival of an unusual person is noticed. It has a boardwalk and a car wash, and a big donut and a fry shop that inexplicably serves both fish and pizza without acknowledging the combination's oddness. It has a lighthouse and a school and a baseball field, and the kind of faded charm of a coastal town that was probably livelier in the 60s or 70s, and has settled into a comfortable, slightly worn present. And at one end of it, on a cliff above the beach, there is a magical alien temple attached to a converted van where 3 immortal crystal beings and 1 half-human, half-alien child live, and sometimes a giant magical lion sleeps on the porch. The relationship between Beach City and the Crystal Gems is one of the show's quietest running threads, and it gets more interesting the more you think about it. The gems have been there for longer than anyone alive can remember. The Crystal Temple is not a new thing, it predates the town itself, presumably, since the town appears to have grown up around and adjacent to a feature that was already there. The residents of Beach City have grown up with the knowledge that something unusual lives at the edge of their town. Some of them ignore this. Some of them have made peace with it. Some of them have theories. Ronaldo Fryman is the show's most explicit engagement with the question of what ordinary people do with extraordinary circumstances. He is the son of the fry shop owner, a teenager with a camera and a blog called Keep Beach City Weird, and a genuine, passionate conviction that Beach City is the site of significant paranormal activity that the broader world is not aware of. He is right. He is approximately right about nearly everything he has identified as worth investigating. He simply does not have the context to interpret the evidence correctly. He knows things happen in Beach City that do not happen elsewhere. He does not know exactly what or why. He is a person who has noticed the shape of the truth without being given access to its content, and his response to that partial information is to build a framework that is wrong in its specifics and accurate in its instinct. There is something kind about the show's treatment of Ronaldo that is also slightly uncomfortable. He is comic relief. Often his theories are wrong in amusing ways. His delivery is dramatic. His commitment to the investigation is disproportionate. But he is also a person who has correctly identified that he is not being told something, who is doing his best with the information available, who deserves the truth but is not being given it. The Crystal Gems do not tell him what is actually happening. They do not engage with his investigation, do not acknowledge what he has found, do not offer him the context that would allow him to understand it correctly. They leave him in the dark, armed with his blog and his theories and his persistent, accurate sense that something is there. The show is not asking you to judge this harshly. The Crystal Gems have good reasons, presumably, for not publicly broadcasting the nature of what they are and what they do. But the show is also, in its quiet way, noting the cost of that secrecy for the people on the outside of it. Ronaldo is seeking. He would receive the truth well, or at least he would try his best with it. He is never given the chance. Mayor Dewey, who runs Beach City through most of the series, has made a different kind of peace with the situation. He knows something is happening. He has seen the ships, the monsters, the fusions. He has chosen with the pragmatic wisdom of a man who has held a position by not asking questions that would require him to change the answers he is giving, not to dig into it. His constituents want to be safe. The Crystal Gems appear to be making them safe. The arrangement works. Asking about the details would require understanding the details, which would require acting on the understanding, which would require resources and decisions and explanations that Mayor Dewey simply does not have the bandwidth for. He has a town to run. His response to a homeworld invasion, climbing into a municipal van and driving away while recording a message advising his constituents to take care of yourselves, I guess, is not a leadership triumph. But it is human in a way the show treats with gentle honesty rather than contempt. He is not heroic. He is also not a villain. He is a person who has identified the limits of his capacity and is operating within them, which is not nothing. The Fryman family, specifically Steven's friend Petey and his brother Ronaldo and their father Mr. Fryman, are among the most interesting background characters in the show precisely because they occupy different positions on the spectrum of awareness and acceptance. Mr. Fryman has been in Beach City his whole life. He has seen enough that he is not surprised by most of what happens. He extends kindness to Steven in a consistent, low-key, not requiring explanation way. He does not ask. He does not make it weird. He just has the same interaction with Steven that he would have with any other kid who came in for a chili fry, and he does it with such complete naturalness that it functions as a kind of grace. The grace of someone who has decided that acceptance is more important than understanding. Connie's family, the Maheshwarans, represent the show's most sustained engagement with the question of a human family being brought into contact with the gem world. Dr. Priyanka Maheswaran is a physician and a formidable parent, and someone who loves her daughter with an intensity that expresses itself as control, as high standards, as the very specific fear of a parent who has worked very hard to give their child every possible advantage and cannot entirely tolerate the idea of that child taking risks that fall outside the plan. When she discovers that Connie has been training as a sword fighter and going on missions with alien beings who get into regular physical confrontations with monsters and hostile aliens, her response is not simply fear. It is the particular anguish of someone who realizes their child has an entire life they did not know about. The episode Nightmare Hospital resolves this conflict in a way that is unusually sophisticated for children's animation, not with Dr. Maheswaran simply accepting everything, and not with Connie simply prevailing, but with both of them acknowledging something real. Dr. Maheswaran has been parenting from fear. She has been controlling because the world is dangerous, and she loves Connie, and control is the form her fear takes. Connie has been hiding because the space, to be honest, had not been created. The resolution is not that the fear goes away, it is that both of them choose a version of honesty over a version of safety. It is not comfortable. It is better than comfortable. It is real. The wider Beach City population's response to the alien activity they live next to is one of the show's most quietly knowing social observations. They have normalized it. Not through ignorance, through the specific human capacity to incorporate extraordinary things into the texture of ordinary life when the extraordinary things are sufficiently consistent. The Crystal Temple has been there their whole lives. The occasional giant monster in the ocean has been part of the risk calculus. The woman with the afro and the boots who sometimes appears on the beach, yes, she is a little unusual, but she's been around forever. She seems fine. You adjust. You keep living. This normalization is both funny and profound. It is funny because the gap between what is happening and how casually it is accepted is, from an outside perspective, enormous. It is profound because this is genuinely how humans process their environments, by treating the consistent things as background. The extraordinary becomes ordinary through repetition. The temple on the cliff is just a building, after long enough. The woman who is made of light is just a neighbor, after long enough. And what this means for the show's broader argument about change, about systems, about what it takes to shift things, is interesting. If people can normalize the presence of alien beings in a beach town, they can normalize almost anything. The capacity for normalization that makes Beach City charming is the same capacity that makes oppressive systems sustainable. Things that should be astonishing stop being astonishing when they are consistent enough. The show knows this. It holds both sides of the observation, the warmth of a community that has made peace with the extraordinary, and the warning implicit in that capacity for acceptance. It does not make the conclusion explicit. It trusts you to hold both sides. What happens to Beach City after the finale, after Steven leaves? After the crystal gems remain? After the world begins to reckon with the changes? The show's resolution implies is a genuinely interesting question. The show leaves entirely open. Does Beach City become a site of gem-human interaction as the new relationship between Homeworld and Earth develops? Does it become something recognizable, a town with a history, a claim to significance, the place where things started to change? Or does it remain what it has always been, a slightly unusual seaside town with a magical temple at one end and a fry shop that serves both fish and pizza? The boardwalk will probably still be there. The big donut probably, Mr. Fryman, probably making chili fries, probably not asking questions, probably extending the same low-key grace to whoever comes in that he has always extended. The town has a quality of endurance. Things happen around it. The town continues. That continuity, that slightly shabby, warm, unglamorous continuity, is the show's most human element. Not the crystal gems, who are ancient and powerful and extraordinary. Not even Steven, who is extraordinary in a different way. But the town itself. The people who have never had the context to fully understand what they live next to, and who have built full, specific, real lives there anyway. Ronaldo's blog. Mr. Fryman's chili fries. The fishing boats going out in the morning. The lighthouse above everything, watching. The ordinary world continuing, while extraordinary things happen at its edges, as it always has, as it always does. Section 17. What Rebecca Sugar built the architecture of a moral universe. Rebecca Sugar was the first solo female creator in Cartoon Network's history. This is a fact that gets cited often, and rightly so, but what matters more than the fact itself is what she did with the position. She did not make the show she was given to make in the sense of making what the network expected when it gave her the opportunity. She made the show she had been building toward the show that had been accumulating in her across years of working in animation, across a creative sensibility that combined the musical instincts of a songwriter with the structural instincts of a storyteller and the emotional directness of someone who had been thinking very carefully about what stories are for. Steven Universe is, in the architecture of its values, one of the most explicitly intentional works in American animation. Every structural decision, the arc of the seasons, the way information is withheld and revealed, the role of music, the visual language, the character design is in service of a coherent moral argument about what is true and what is good and how the two relate. The show does not make this argument by stating it, or not primarily. It makes it through the accumulation of story, through demonstrating rather than declaring. By the time Change Your Mind arrives and Steven sings his convictions directly to White Diamond, those convictions have been earned across 5 seasons of narrative. They are not platitudes. They are conclusions. The argument the show makes, at its most fundamental, every being is more than their function. This is stated in multiple ways across the series, sometimes by Rose, sometimes by the Crystal Gems, sometimes by Steven, but it is proved over and over through the stories of characters who were made for specific purposes and became something other than those purposes, something richer and stranger and more genuinely alive. Pearl was made to hold things and be decorative. She is a warrior, an artist, a person in grief, someone learning to want something for herself. Amethyst was made to be a quartz soldier. She is the most specific and individual gem in the Crystal Gems, the one whose personality is most clearly entirely her own. Garnet was made, 2 halves of her, for entirely different functions. Together, she is the most stable and powerful force in the series. Every villain in the show who has a transformation arc undergoes a version of the same discovery. The function is not the self. The role assigned is not the person inhabiting it. There is more in there. There is always more in there. The system that assigned the role was designed to prevent that more from surfacing to keep every gem in the lane it was made for, because a civilization built on function cannot tolerate beings who exceed their function. But the more is there. It was always there. It is, the show argues, constitutive of what it means to be a self at all. The opposing argument, the argument of Homeworld, the argument of the Diamond Authority at its most crystallized, is that function is identity. That you are what you were made for. That departing from that is degradation, that the system's assignment of roles is correct and permanent and not subject to appeal. This argument is presented through characters we come to understand as deeply suffering. White Diamond, sealed inside perfection, unable to be surprised. Yellow Diamond, managing grief through relentless efficiency. Every gem who has internalized the caste system so completely that challenging it feels not like liberation but like dissolution. The show's compassion, and this is one of its most distinctive qualities, extends even to these characters. It does not ask you to hate the system's enforcers. It asks you to understand them as people who were themselves produced by the system, who are themselves trapped in it, who are themselves suffering its costs even as they perpetuate it. Yellow Diamond is not free. Blue Diamond is not free. White Diamond, most of all, is not free. She has built a prison of perfection so complete that nothing real can reach her, and she lives inside it with the particular loneliness of someone who has made themselves unreachable. This is not an excuse for the harm they have caused. The show is very clear about the scale and the specificity of that harm, but it is a refusal to use the existence of that harm as a reason to write the perpetrators off as irredeemable. Because if people are capable of change, and the show argues consistently that they are, then the test of that belief is whether you extend it to people you have every reason to dismiss. Steven extends it to the Diamonds. He extends it to Jasper. He extends it, in future, to people who are not doing anything wrong to him but who he has decided need to be fixed, which is its own kind of not extending it correctly. The critique embedded in future, the critique of Steven's own savior complex, his use of helping as a way of avoiding his own needs, is the show turning its central value back on itself and checking whether it holds up under pressure. And it does hold up, but in a more complicated form. Helping people is good. Helping people in a way that uses their need as a substitute for processing your own is not helping. It is a transaction disguised as altruism. The love the show argues for is not self-effacing. It is not the kind of love that makes you smaller in the service of making others larger. It is the kind that requires you to be genuinely present, which requires you to be genuinely yourself, which requires you to take your own interior life seriously enough to look at it. Steven learns this, at great cost. In a series of conversations with a therapist who does not know about gems or diamonds or the specific shape of his history, but who knows what grief looks like, what hypervigilance looks like, what the behavior of someone who has been managing crises for so long that peace feels like threat looks like, Dr. West is not a perfect therapist. She makes some missteps with Steven in the limited time the show has to depict their work together. But she is real in the way of a person who has skills and tries to use them honestly, and her presence in future is part of the show's argument that human institutions, imperfect, limited, not equipped for every situation, can still be valuable, can still help, even when the patient is a hybrid alien teenager who sometimes turns into a pink monster. The visual architecture of the show is worth lingering on because it is doing work that the words do not do alone. The color system is one of the most sustained pieces of environmental storytelling and animation. Beach City is warm yellows and oranges and greens, the palette of a lived-in world, organic and slightly messy. The Crystal Temple is pink and purple, warm but with the geological permanence of something that has been there for a very long time. Homeworld is white and stark, colors assigned by Diamond Authority, angular and precise in a way that is visually striking and emotionally cold. When Steven enters White Diamond's domain in the Season 5 finale, the color drains out of the world. The scenes in White Diamond's presence are almost monochrome. Her environment has bleached everything near it, stripped it of variety, reduced it to a controlled palette. This is not a metaphor. It is a visual statement of what White Diamond's authority does to everything it touches. It removes the color. It removes the individuality. It makes things white, which in this context means empty, which means controlled, which means hers. When she blushes pink when Steven's laughter reaches her and she laughs in spite of herself, that undignified, surprised laugh, and the color comes back into her cheeks for the first time in what appears to be a very long time. It is the most visually beautiful moment in the series. One spot of color returning to a white face. It is the color of pink diamond, which is the color of the child she lost, which is the color she was always missing, and she finds it not through grief or guilt, but through the involuntary surprise of being genuinely delighted by something small and real and imperfect. Rebecca Sugar built a show where the visual language does that, where a blush is a cosmological event, where the return of a single color is the turning point of a civilization. That is not accidental. Nothing in this show is accidental. Everything that feels like a small detail is, on examination, a deliberate choice in service of a coherent vision. The show's greatness is in the coherence, in the way the music and the visuals and the narrative and the character work all move in the same direction, toward the same conclusions, with the same underlying convictions. It does not always hit its marks. There are episodes that don't quite land, arcs that get compressed, threads that don't get the space they needed. These are the imperfections of a large project working within real constraints. They do not undermine the whole. The whole is extraordinary. There is a version of Steven Universe that does not trust its audience. That states its themes explicitly, that explains its symbols, that walks you through what the colors mean and why the music matters. That version would be a lesser show. The version that exists trusts you to find things, to make connections, to arrive at meanings that were not handed to you. It treats its viewers, including its very young viewers, as people capable of receiving something complex, of sitting with something that is not immediately resolved, of being held by a story that does not tell you exactly what to feel. That trust is itself a statement of values. A show that trusts its audience is a show that believes in the people watching it. A show that believes in the people watching it is, in the small and real sense of the everyday, the same thing as a show that believes in people. That every being is more than their function. That more is always there. The show believed that. It was built from that belief, and it leaves you with it. Each time you come back, a little heavier and a little more sure that the weight is worth carrying. Section 18. The Inheritance, What We Are Made From and What We Choose. Steven Universe is a show about inheritance. This is stated explicitly. Eventually, Rebecca Sugar has said in interviews that one of the show's central questions is what it means to inherit the choices of the people who came before you. But it is felt before it is stated, present in every season from the first episode onward, in the way that the most fundamental things in a story are felt before they are named. Steven inherits the gem in his stomach. He inherits the history it carries, the power it contains, the identity it is associated with. He inherits the war his mother fought, and the lies she told, and the love she expressed, and the harm she caused. He inherits the crystal gems, who loved her and were shaped by her, and who have complicated, unresolved feelings about the person they loved, and the things she hid, and the weight of everything she left when she chose to become something else. He inherits Beach City, which grew up around the temple, which has been living next to this piece of gem history for generations. He inherits the earth itself, which was almost colonized, which carries the permanent scars of the kindergarten in its geology, which has been the site of a war it did not consent to host. He did not choose any of this. It was in place before he was born. It is his birthright in the most literal possible sense. This is what he was born into. This is the context of his existence. This is what it means to be Steven Quart's universe on the first day of the show and every day after. And the question the show asks, over 5 seasons and a film and a follow-up series, is not can he escape this inheritance. It is what does he do with it? How does he carry what cannot be put down? What does he choose to add to it? What does he decide is his to do, and what does he decide is not his responsibility, having been handed to him without consent? How do you love something, a parent, a history, a civilization that has caused real harm, without pretending the harm did not happen? How do you carry that love alongside the anger that is also true and also deserved? How do you find yourself inside all of that? This is not a question with an answer. It is a question with a practice. The practice looks like therapy and honesty and allowing the people you love to carry some of what you have been insisting on carrying alone. It looks like leaving Beach City in a van when you have done what you can do there, not because Beach City is bad, but because staying would be staying out of fear rather than staying out of choice, and there is a difference, and you have learned enough to know the difference. It looks like crying. It looks like saying out loud that you are angry. Every character in the show is engaged in their own version of this practice. Pearl carrying the secret and the grief and slowly, with enormous difficulty, beginning to build a self that does not depend on keeping the secret or on the person who is gone. Garnet being Garnet, which is the continuous act of choosing the same love in new circumstances, of finding again and again the thing that made fusion the right choice and not the necessary one. Amethyst deciding, over and over, that the chamber she came from is not the last word on who she is. Lapis finding the difference between staying because you cannot leave and staying because you want to. Bismuth holding the question she never got answered and continuing anyway, because the question is worth asking even when no one is ready to hear it. And Stephen, at the end of Future, in the van, with Connie and the open road, choosing to begin. Not to escape the inheritance. To carry it forward into somewhere new, somewhere where he gets to be something besides the person managing the aftermath of everyone else's choices, where he gets to make choices that are his, where the next chapter is authored by him. That is the inheritance he builds, the one he chooses, the one he is going to pass on, eventually, to whoever comes after, in whatever form that taking passes through. He is building something. Not a rebellion and not a crystal empire and not a monument to a person who is gone. Something smaller and more durable. A self. A genuine, freely chosen, imperfect, remarkable self. Gems, the show tells us, are made of the choices they make. Rose said that on the tape. She said, "I am made of the choices I made." And she was both the beautiful ones and the terrible ones. The love and the lies, the rebellion and the sealing away, the joy and the abandonment. All of it was her, and all of it is now part of Stephen. And Stephen is also made of the choices he makes. He has made good ones. He will make more. He will make some that cost him and others he will not be sure were right, and some that will be clearly, simply, the right thing, chosen at the right time with full knowledge of what it means to choose. He will carry the gem and the history and the love and the anger and the particular brightness that is entirely and specifically his own, that came not from Rose and not from Greg, but from whatever happens when a human person and a gem being make something new together, something the universe had not produced before, something that could summon a shield and fuse with humans and talk to clusters of grief shards in the Earth's mantle and make a diamond laugh. He will be okay. You believe this at the end. Not because the show tells you so, because it showed you who he is across all of those episodes and all of those seasons, and what you saw was someone capable of it. He will be okay, and so will you, probably. If you are lying here in the quiet listening to this and wondering the same things he wonders, carrying the same kinds of weight, the inheritance is heavy. The practice of carrying it is hard. The van is a reasonable vehicle for the beginning of the next thing. Go when you are ready. Take what is yours. Put down what is not. The ocean will still be there. The crystal temple will still be lit against the sky. Lion will be on the steps, pink and vast, keeping his secrets, aging very slowly, watching the road. Section 19. The things still in the frame. Let's rest here for a while. In this section, let your breathing go very slow. Let the weight of everything you have heard, everything we have traveled through tonight, all the histories and the losses and the choices and the costs, let it settle. You do not have to hold it actively. It is already in you. It will be there tomorrow when you want to pick it back up. For now, let it just be there, the way a stone is there at the bottom of a river, holding its place without effort. Steven Universe is still there whenever you want to go back to it. This is one of the things about a show that was built the way this one was built. It does not become less on rewatch. It becomes more. Every time you bring more of yourself to it, you find more of it. The show you watch at 15, and the show you watch at 25, and the show you watch at 40 are not the same show, because you are not the same person, and the show has the depth to meet you where you are every time. There are things still in the frame that we have not gotten to. Rose's chest in Lion's dimension, which was visible and open in the film, and whose contents were never shown. The other lions from Buddy Budwick's journal, the pack that Rose lived with centuries ago, ordinary desert lions who lived and died while she watched and who might, one of them, be the origin of the loss she could not accept. The precise nature of what Pearl experienced during the centuries between the war and meeting Greg, those long, quiet years of just the three of them on a beach, managing the aftermath of something enormous. What Garnet does with her future vision in the very long stretches of time, when there is no mission and the futures she sees are quiet, domestic, the kind that do not require her particular skills and which she inhabits anyway, being Garnet in the small spaces between the large moments. What it is like to be a human in Beach City when your grandfather told you stories about the woman on the cliff, and your mother told you stories, and now here you are and the woman on the cliff is still there, still wearing the same boots, not a day older, and you are already beginning to gray. What it means to be the lighthouse keeper, if there is one, living in the lighthouse above it all, seeing the fusions walk by below, watching the warp pad activate in the distance, noting in a logbook that something unusual has occurred at the Crystal Temple again tonight. What the cluster does at night, in its voluntary bubble, in the mantle of the Earth, in the dark and heat of the planet's interior, whether it dreams, whether the shards within it dream, whether whatever minimal experience they had before the healing of the finale was more continuous than anyone knew, whether there were beings down there with enough selfhood to have something like a sense of time passing, of duration, of waiting for a light that did not come for 5,000 years. What Jasper says the first time someone speaks to her as though she is not going to hurt them. What she says the first time Amethyst sits next to her on the beach and doesn't say anything. What she says, if she says anything, about the war, about Pink Diamond, about the rebellion she fought against, and the revelation that the rebellion and the empire she was fighting for were both in some essential way the same person in different clothes. What Peridot's Meep Morps look like 100 years from now, when she has been making art on Earth for a century, and the Earth has been making its impression on her for the same amount of time. What she makes when she is not trying to explain something or figure something out, when she makes something just because she wants to, what that thing looks like. Whether it is beautiful, what Connie becomes, she is 12 at the start of the show and she is going to be something extraordinary. You can see it in her. She has the specific combination of intelligence and willingness and genuine care that produces people who change things. She is going to go somewhere and learn something and do something, and Steven is going to hear about it and feel exactly what he should feel. Proud and a little awed and completely unsurprised. She was always going to become this, what the stars look like from a gem planet that has never been colonized, that has had the time to develop its own civilization and its own astronomy, and its own particular relationship with the night sky. Whether there are gems out there who have never been under a diamond's authority, whether the universe is larger than the diamond authority's reach, and if it is, what lives in the spaces beyond the edge of the maps, what the next thing is that the Earth will face, in the long run, when Steven is old or older or whatever he is going to be, the crystal gems will be there. They will have new gems with them, probably bismuth and lapis and peridot, the off-colors, maybe gems from Homeworld who choose a different path. They will face whatever it is with the same combination of competence and chaos and love that they always have. They will figure it out. They always do. What Steven sees, in the ordinary moments of the road, when the van is moving and Connie is reading something and the music from the radio is whatever the radio offers and the scenery is just scenery, not magic, not significance, just the ordinary world going by. What he thinks about, what he finds himself smiling at when he wasn't expecting to, what it feels like to be, for the first time, not managing anything, just present, just himself, just on his way to something. Let these questions rest in you as you rest. You do not have to answer them. Nobody does. They are the open space at the edge of the frame, the territory that extends past the end of the story, the world that keeps going after the credits. They are the show being generous. They are the show saying, here is enough to think about for a lifetime. Here is more than we could ever fit in 5 seasons. Here is the world. Take as much as you want. There is always more. Section 20. Falling asleep to a show that never stops getting heavier. The night is quiet now. Whatever time it is where you are, whatever particular arrangement of dark and silence, and the small sounds of wherever you are resting the night has settled into itself. The day is over and the next one has not started yet, and in between there is just this, the present, the particular floating quality of the hours before sleep. Steven Universe is a good show to fall asleep to. Not because it is mindless, it is the opposite of mindless, but because it is the kind of story that does not require you to be fully alert to receive it. You can have it at the edges of consciousness, in the half-dream space, and what comes through will be whatever you need to receive. The music will find you there. The warmth of it will find you there. And when you wake up, you may find that something you heard last night is still in you, turning over slowly, looking for where to settle. The show is about a world that kept going even after terrible things happened to it. The Earth is still there. 5,000 years of gem activity, a colonization that was stopped mid-process, a war, a corruption, a cluster buried in the mantle, the crystal temple on the beach, and the ocean is still there. The seagulls are still there. The boardwalk is still there. The world kept going. There is something in that which I find, in the small hours, very comforting. Not comfort in the sense of comfort that denies the difficulty. The show does not deny anything, which is part of why it's comforting. It is comforting the way truth is comforting, when you encounter it clearly. This thing happened, and it cost something real, and the world continued, and the people in it found ways to carry what they needed to carry, and something new was possible after. Not everything was fixed. The show is clear about that, in the way we have been through tonight at length. Some things are still in the earth. Some things are still open. Some things will take a very long time. The morning after the healing is not the healing. The path forward is not straight. But the path is there. The road in front of the van is there. The van is such a perfect image for this. The van is Greg's. Greg built his adult life around that van. It was the vehicle of his musical wandering, of the period when he was young and going towards something he hadn't defined yet. He gave Stephen the van for the next period of wandering. The van passes from father to child. The object of inheritance, in a show about inheritance, is a vehicle for going somewhere, not a gem of immense power, not a weapon, not a monument, a van. Something practical and unglamorous and useful for the particular purpose of getting from where you are to somewhere else. Stephen drives away in the van. He is going somewhere he hasn't defined yet. He has his mother's gem in his stomach and his father's van under his hands and his best friend in the passenger seat and the road in front of him, and he has been through enough that the undefined does not frighten him the way it might have. He has fought cosmic entities. He has talked to a superweapon buried in the Earth's core. He has sat in a room with the most powerful being in the gem civilization and made her laugh. He can handle not knowing what comes next. You can probably handle that too. That is maybe the smallest and most practical thing the show has to say. You can handle not knowing what comes next. Not because the next thing will not be difficult, not because the wait will not sometimes be more than you expected, but because you have handled things before, and you have people, and the capacity to reach toward other people when the reaching is what's needed is itself a kind of power that the show argues is the realest kind. The beach is still there. The temple is still lit. The crystal gems are on the steps, watching him go, and they are not worried about him, not exactly, or not only. They are proud. They are the particular kind of proud that comes from watching someone you raised however imperfectly, however brokenly, however incompletely you understood what raising him would require. Walk into a future that is entirely his own. They will be there when he comes back. That is the crystal gem promise, unspoken, as solid as the gemstones they carry. They will be there. They are, in the most fundamental sense, where they are supposed to be, doing what they are supposed to do, and he is going where he is supposed to go, and the correspondence of those facts is enough. Good night to Beach City. Good night to the boardwalk and the big donut and the lighthouse above everything. Good night to the crystal temple, and the warp pad in the living room, and the star print duvet in Stephen's room. Good night to Garnet, who knows things, who has always known things, who sees the futures spreading out from here and chooses the ones that lead toward love. Good night to Pearl, standing on a cliff in the wind or sitting somewhere quiet with her phone, with the number in it, with whatever she is going to do next, whatever she is going to choose for herself, for the first time, fully and freely and knowing it is hers. Good night to Amethyst, who is the most alive person in the room, always, who built herself out of nothing and filled it with everything and keeps going with a velocity that is entirely her own. Good night to Bismuth, at the forge, her arms already tools, already building something useful. Good night to Lapis, wherever she is, however far she has flown, with the door behind her still open, still the thing she needs. Good night to Peridot, in the barn or out of it, studying a new thing with the specific Peridot intensity that treats every piece of information as a gift. Good night to Lion. On the steps. Still pink, still vast, still keeping his secrets with the perfect composure of a being who has decided that some things belong only to the person whose memories they are. His mane still white and glowing when he uses his powers, his eyes still full of something that might be patience or might be wisdom or might just be the very particular look of a very large cat who has lived longer than most of the conversations people have tried to have with him. He will be there in the morning. He is always there in the morning. Good night to the cluster, in the mantle, in its bubble, at peace. Good night to the forget-me-nots in the garden, wherever the garden is, the blue flowers grown wild around an absence, naming the thing they surround. Good night to the chest in Lion's dimension open, finally open, whatever was inside now known to the one person it was meant for. The lid up, the keeping done, the contents released into the hands they were always waiting for. Good night to the show itself, which is still there, still whole, still waiting for you whenever you want to go back to it. 5 seasons and a film, and a limited follow-up series, and more songs than you have probably counted, and more background details than anyone has fully cataloged, and the same underlying conviction in every frame. That the people you love are complicated, and that is fine. That the world is heavy, and it continues anyway. That the chest exists, and we don't always know what's in it, and somehow that's okay. That the capacity to be changed by something to be reached, to be moved, to find the color coming back into your face when something surprised and delighted you is not a weakness. It is not a deviation from your perfect form. It is the proof that you are real, that you are present, that you are more than what you were made to be, which you are. You always have been. The show believed that about every being it ever depicted, and it believes it about you, in whatever form the belief of a show extends to the people who watch it. You are more than your function. There is always more in there. The more is the point. Now rest. The van is on the road. Steven is going somewhere. The ocean is constant and reliable, the sound of it the same as it has always been, the same as it will be for a very long time after all of us are gone. The world kept going through everything it went through. It will keep going through everything it has yet to go through. You will keep going too. Sleep well. The show is still there. If you made it to the end of this one, or if you drifted off somewhere in the middle and this is waiting for you when you wake up, thank you. Videos like this take a long time to make, and knowing that they find the people who need them makes it worth every hour. If you want more long-form lore dives into the shows that carry weight beyond what their runtime suggests, subscribing is the best way to make sure the next one reaches you. Leave a comment if something from tonight is still turning over in you. Sometimes the conversation in the comments becomes the best part of the whole thing. Take care of yourselves. The morning is on its way. A final note. On the Is It On? There is one moment in the show I keep returning to, and it is the smallest one. Smaller than the corruption, smaller than the diamond reveals, smaller than anything in the cosmology. It is the first 3 seconds of Rose's VHS tape. She is in a forest. Ancient, enormous trees. The kind that takes centuries to grow. Light coming through the canopy in the way light only comes through when there is a great deal of canopy to come through. She is pointing the camera at herself. She has figured out which end to point, presumably after some experimentation, and she looks at it with an expression that is the most human expression she ever has in the series. Uncertain, slightly nervous, trying to figure out how this works. She says, "Is it on?" She says it presumably to Pearl, who is behind the camera or nearby, who knows how the camera works and is probably already slightly exasperated with the amount of time this is taking. She says it the way you say it, hesitant, checking, not wanting to start the real thing before you know the mechanism is working, not wanting to say the important words into nothing. The camera is on. Pearl probably says so. Rose takes a breath. And then she speaks to her son, who does not exist yet, who she will never meet, who will watch this tape in a big donut on a borrowed VHS player with his friends around him, who will watch it again alone many times after, who carries her gem in his stomach and her history on his shoulders, and who needed, at the most basic level, exactly what she was trying to give him with this tape, evidence that she was real, not legendary, not the great rose quartz, leader of the crystal gems, savior of Earth, beloved and mourned and mythologized, real, someone who didn't know how a camera worked, someone who had to ask, someone who took a breath before saying the important things, because the important things are always a little frightening to say. She was practicing. She says it herself. I am practicing for making a message. she did not do this in one take. She sat in that forest, probably more than once, probably on more than one day, pointed a camera at herself and tried to find the right words and could not find them. And eventually she pointed the camera at herself one more time and said something that was not the right words but was what she had, and she gave it to Stephen anyway. That is what the show made. Not a perfect work. A real one, built from the same materials as everything else that matters, from love and from trying, and from the willingness to sit in a forest with a camera you don't entirely understand, and say something imperfect to someone you will never meet. The camera was on. The trying is visible in the tape. We are still watching. That is enough. That was always enough. Sleep well.